We trust museums to preserve history, to safeguard priceless artifacts behind glass and security guards. But what if some of the objects they protect don't want to be contained? What if they carry with them something ancient, powerful, and deeply malevolent? We're talking about cursed objects. Artifacts that, according to legend, bring misfortune, madness, and even death to those who possess them, disturb them, or even just get too close. And incredibly, some of the most famous and supposedly dangerous arichgur of these objects aren't hidden away in dusty vaults. They're on public display, in museums around the world, viewed by millions every year. From the glittering, deadly Hope Diamond, leaving a trail of ruined lives in its wake, to the chillingly preserved Utsi the Iceman, whose discovery unleashed a string of bizarre fatalities, to the treasures pulled from Tutankhamun's tomb, sparking whispers of a pharaoh's deadly revenge, and even ancient weapons and unassuming jewelry said to harbor dark forces. These aren't just stories told around campfires. These are legends attached to real artifacts you could go and see today. But should you? Are these curses real? Or just elaborate tales spun around tragedy and coincidence? Join us as we investigate the chilling histories of the world's most famous cursed museum objects. These are their terrifying stories. This is Utsi the Iceman. He's a 5,300-year-old corpse, so well preserved that his discoverers could see his tattoos and judge his fashion sense. Found frozen in the Utstal Alps, he was initially mistaken for a modern-day mountaineer. But Utsi is far older, a relic of the Copper Age. And some say he's also cursed, leaving a trail of death in his wake. This is his chilling story. It was September 19th, 1991. Two German tourists, Helmut and Erika Simon, were hiking in the Ötztal Alps on the border of Austria and Italy. At an elevation of 10,530 feet, they spotted something unusual protruding from the ice, a brown, leathery form. Thinking it was a lost and recent climber, they attempted to free the body. Little did they know, they were looking at a man who had died over 5 millennia ago. Otzi, as he came to be known, was a scientific marvel. His body, remarkably preserved by the ice, offered an unprecedented glimpse into the Copper Age. Scientists sequenced his genome, traced his relatives, analyzed his stomach contents, which included ibex meat, and diagnosed his ailments: Lyme disease, parasitic worms, and gallstones. They even determined his age at death, a respectable 45 for that era. But it wasn't just Utsi's body that was recovered. His clothing, a grass cloak, a bearskin cap, leather leggings, and shoes stuffed with grass for insulation, were also found intact, as was his equipment: a copper axe, a flint dagger, a bow and arrows, and a backpack. It was a complete Copper Age kit, offering unparalleled insights into the life of a prehistoric man. His cause of death was not old age or the freezing temperature. After a scan, it was determined that he was murdered. There was an arrowhead lodged in his shoulder. But as scientists and researchers flocked to study Utsi, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. People connected to the Iceman started to die, and the curse of Utsi was born. The first, and perhaps most poignant, was Helmut Simon, one of the hikers who discovered Utsi. In 2004, 13 years after the discovery, Simon went hiking in the same area where he'd found the Iceman. He vanished during a blizzard, and his body was later found, frozen. It was almost as if the mountain had claimed a replacement. Then, just an hour after Simon's funeral, Dieter Warnecke, the head of the rescue team that had searched for Simon, died of a heart attack. He was 45 years old, the same age as Ötzi when he died. Konrad Spindler, an archaeologist who was one of the first experts to examine Ötzi, died in 2005 from complications of multiple sclerosis. His illness was diagnosed not long after examining the Iceman. Rainer Henn, a forensic pathologist who examined Ötzi, died in a car crash on his way to give a lecture about the mummy. Kurt Fritz, a mountaineer who had helped guide researchers to Ötzi's body, was killed in an avalanche. Rainer Holz, a filmmaker who documented the recovery of Ötzi from the ice, died of a brain tumor. And finally, Tom Loy, a molecular archaeologist who made groundbreaking discoveries about Ötzi's final hours by analyzing blood traces on his clothing and weapons, died in 2005 from a blood disease that some say was diagnosed shortly after he first handled Ötzi's belongings. 7 deaths, all connected in some way to Ötzi. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the sheer number of fatalities and their proximity to the Iceman fueled the curse narrative. Now, both Austria and Italy, seeing a potential tourist opportunity, both laid claim to Ötzi due to him being located so close to the border. It was later determined that Ötzi was in fact on the Italian side. Today, Ötzi resides at the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano, Italy. He's the star attraction, housed in a specially designed cold cell, visible through a small viewing window. The museum dedicates 3 entire floors to him, showcasing his belongings and even a lifelike reconstruction of what he might have looked like. Is Ötzi truly cursed? It's impossible to say for sure. Correlation doesn't equal causation, and the deaths could be attributed to chance, the inherent dangers of mountaineering, and the natural progression of illnesses. But the legend persists, a chilling reminder of the power of ancient mysteries and the enduring human fascination with the unknown. This is the unlucky mummy, or more accurately, it's the unlucky mummy board. It's not actually a mummy at all, but the intricately painted lid of a coffin that once housed the remains of an ancient Egyptian priestess. And according to legend, this seemingly innocuous artifact is responsible for a string of disasters, including shipwrecks, fires, and even the sinking of the Titanic. This is its bizarre and terrifying story. Now, cursed mummies are a dime a dozen in folklore. You've got your Nesmin, whose British buyer was trampled to death by an elephant, and Kentaka Icheche, who vowed to strangle anyone who violated his tomb. But the unlucky mummy? Well, it's not even a mummy. The unlucky mummy, currently residing in the British Museum, is a beautifully crafted wooden mummy board, about 5 feet long. It's shaped and painted to resemble the deceased, a priestess of Amen-Ra, who lived around 3,000 years ago, during Egypt's 21st dynasty. Her serene face, framed by dark hair, is adorned with colorful patterns, images of gods, insects and animals, and hieroglyphs. It's a stunning piece of ancient art, but the actual mummy it once covered is long gone, lost to history. So, how did this seemingly harmless object gain such a sinister reputation? The story begins, as many cursed object tales do, with acquisition. In 1868, a group of 4 Oxford graduates on a trip to Egypt acquired the mummy board. The details are murky, but what followed, according to legend, was a rapid descent into misfortune. 2 of the men allegedly died on the trip. A third, Thomas Douglas Murray, lost an arm in a hunting accident. The fourth, Arthur Wheeler, returned to England, only to lose his fortune. Twice. It seemed the curse was swift and indiscriminate. As the mummy board passed from owner to owner, the tragedies continued. A photographer who captured its image died. A porter who carried it met a similar fate. Even a translator who attempted to decipher the hieroglyphs reportedly took his own life. These are the stories, at least. And it's likely that Thomas Douglas Murray is responsible for starting many of them. You see, Murray was an avid visitor to Egypt, but more importantly, was a member of the Ghost Club, where he told and retold the story on numerous occasions. By the time the unlucky mummy arrived at the British Museum, its reputation was firmly established. Newspaper articles sensationalized its supposed powers, dubbing it the Priestess of Death. And the public, ever eager for a good spooky tale, ate it up. The curse, however, didn't stop at the museum doors. Deaths were attributed to it, with museum staff and visitors alike falling victim to its supposed wrath. Any unfortunate incident, any illness, any accident was quickly blamed on the unlucky mummy. And then, things got even weirder. The legend expanded, taking on a life of its own, fueled by rumor and speculation. The most outrageous claim? That the unlucky mummy was responsible for the sinking of the Titanic. The story goes that the British Museum, tired of the constant death and disaster, secretly sold the mummy board to an American collector or museum. It was loaded onto the Titanic for its maiden voyage, and well, we all know how that ended. Of course, there's absolutely no evidence to support this claim. The unlucky mummy remained and remains in the British Museum the entire time. It even supposedly caused World War I. After being returned following its voyage on the Titanic and its brief stay on the Empress of Ireland, which also sank, it was supposedly then sold to a German who gifted the mummy to Kaiser Wilhelm II. But, as far-fetched as it sounds, the unlucky mummy never left England after the museum acquired it. It made a few trips to various exhibitions after 1990, but other than that, the mummy has remained in the British Museum. Today, the unlucky mummy is on display in the Egyptian galleries, surrounded by actual mummies and other funerary artifacts. Ironically, it's easy to miss, overshadowed by the more complete and imposing sarcophagi and mummies around it. You could walk right past it, completely unaware of the terrifying legend it supposedly carries. Is the unlucky mummy truly cursed? Or is it simply a victim of sensationalized storytelling, a convenient scapegoat for misfortune and tragedy? The answer, like the mummy itself, remains shrouded in mystery. But one thing is certain. The legend of the unlucky mummy, however improbable, continues to fascinate and terrify, a testament to the enduring power of a good, spooky story. And perhaps a warning to those who would dismiss the power of ancient artifacts a little too quickly. This is the tomb of Tutankhamun, the boy king of ancient Egypt. Discovered in 1922, it unleashed a torrent of excitement, wonder, and, some say, a deadly curse upon the modern world. This is the story of the curse of the pharaohs and the string of tragedies that followed the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb. Tutankhamun. Even the name sounds ancient and mysterious. He was a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, ascending to the throne at the tender age of 9. He ruled for a mere 10 years, dying in the 1300s BCE, his cause of death still a mystery. But what he lacked in longevity, he more than made up for in posthumous fame. thanks to the discovery of his remarkably intact tomb in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. In 1917, British archaeologist Howard Carter began his search for Tutankhamun's tomb, funded by the wealthy Lord Carnarvon. For years they searched, finding little of significance in the already well-looted valley. Then, in November 1922, on what was to be their final season, a seemingly insignificant discovery. A worker tripped over a rock that turned out to be the first of a staircase, leading down into the darkness. Carter, realizing the potential significance, reburied the steps and summoned Lord Carnarvon. Together, they cleared the stairway, revealing a sealed doorway bearing the cartouche of Tutankhamun. It was an archaeologist's dream, an intact royal tomb, seemingly untouched for over 3,000 years. On November 26, 1922, Carter made a small hole in the doorway and peered inside, holding a candle. When Carnarvon asked if he could see anything, Carter famously replied, "Yes, wonderful things." He was looking at a chamber crammed with golden treasures, funerary objects, and most importantly, another sealed door, promising the burial chamber of the boy king himself. It took weeks to carefully catalogue and remove the treasures from the antechamber. Meanwhile, news of the discovery spread like wildfire, captivating the world. Tourists flocked to the site, eager for a glimpse of the ancient wonders. Finally, in February 1923, the sealed burial chamber was opened, revealing the sarcophagus of Tutankhamun, and within it, the golden coffin containing the mummified remains of the pharaoh. But the triumph of the discovery was soon overshadowed by tragedy. Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financier, died just a few months later, in April 1923. The official cause was blood poisoning, resulting from an infected mosquito bite that he'd nicked while shaving. But the timing, so soon after the tomb's opening, was suspicious. The media already denied access to the excavation due to an exclusive deal with the Times of London, seized on the story. The curse of the pharaohs was born. And the deaths didn't stop with Carnarvon. George J. Gould, a wealthy American financier who visited the tomb, died of pneumonia shortly afterward. Prince Ali Kamel Fahmy Bey, an Egyptian aristocrat, was shot by his wife. Aubrey Herbert, Carnarvon's half-brother, died of blood poisoning. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, the radiologist who X-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, died of a mysterious illness. The list grew, encompassing members of Carter's team, visitors to the tomb, and even relatives of those involved. Fueling the curse narrative were spurious claims and embellishments. Stories circulated of a cobra, a symbol of the pharaohs, eating Carnarvon's canary on the day the tomb was opened. Of his dog howling and dying back in England at the exact moment of his master's death. Of a clay tablet inscribed with a curse found within the tomb, later destroyed to keep the workers from panicking. These claims were almost all fabricated, or at least impossible to verify. And what of Howard Carter, the man who actually opened the tomb? He lived for another 17 years, dying of Hodgkin's disease in 1939 at the age of 64. His long life is often cited as proof against the curse. But the legend persisted, and the list of supposed victims continued to grow, expanding to include anyone even remotely connected to the tomb. The curse of Tutankhamun became a cultural phenomenon, feeding into the existing fascination with ancient Egypt and the occult. It tapped into a deep-seated fear, the fear of disturbing the dead, of violating sacred spaces, and of unleashing forces beyond our understanding. It made sense. If anything was going to be cursed, an Egyptian pharaoh's tomb makes the most amount of sense. Today, the treasures of Tutankhamun's tomb, including his iconic golden mask and sarcophagus, have toured the world, drawing massive crowds. A new Grand Egyptian Museum near the Pyramids of Giza is set to house the entire collection, bringing all 5,000+ artifacts and the body of the boy king himself together under one roof. This is the Ring of Silvianus. It's a large gold signet ring dating back to the 4th century Roman Britain. It's not particularly flashy, not studded with jewels, but it carries a dark history, a tale of theft, curses, and a connection to one of the most famous fantasy stories ever written. This is the story of the Ring of Silvianus, the ring that may have inspired Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. Our story begins not in Middle-earth, but in a field in Hampshire, England. In 1785, a farmer, ploughing his land, unearthed a remarkable find, a heavy gold ring, unlike anything he'd seen before. This wasn't just any trinket. It was a relic of Roman Britain, a time when the mighty Roman Empire stretched its reach across much of Europe. The ring is substantial, almost too large for a normal finger. It has a square bezel bearing the image of the goddess Venus. The band is faceted, giving it a slightly rugged look, like a worn lug nut. And around the band, etched in reverse, is a Latin inscription, Seniciana vivas iende, which, with a slight misspelling, translates to Senicianus, live well in God. It was a common phrase, a wish for good fortune. But, as we'll soon see, this ring would become associated with anything but good fortune. The farmer sold the ring to the wealthy Shute family, who resided at the Vine, a grand estate in Hampshire. There, it became one of many antiquities in their collection, a fascinating curiosity, but nothing more. And it might have remained just that, a forgotten relic of a bygone era, had it not been for another discovery almost a century later and some 80 miles away. In Gloucestershire are the ruins of a Roman temple dedicated to the god Nodens, a deity associated with healing, hunting, and the sea. The site, known as Lydney Park or Dwarf's Hill, yielded many archaeological finds, including, most crucially, a small, thin lead tablet. This wasn't just any tablet. It was Edifixio, a curse tablet, inscribed with a plea to the god Nodens. And the curse? It read, "For the god Nodens. Silvianus has lost a ring and has donated 1/2 its worth to Nodens. Among those named Senicianus, permit no good health until it is returned to the temple of Nodens." A stolen ring, a curse, and a name, Senicianus, that matched the inscription on the gold ring found decades earlier. The connection was too striking to ignore. In 1888, Challoner William Chute, heir to the Vine estate, wrote about the connection between the ring and the curse tablet, proposing a compelling theory. He believed that Senicianus, perhaps a visitor to the temple of Nodens, had stolen the ring from Silvianus. Silvianus, in turn, invoked the god's wrath, cursing the thief and anyone bearing his name until the ring was returned. But that doesn't explain why it's inscribed with Senician vivas iende. Well, it's theorized that Senicianus had the inscription added to protect himself. But the story doesn't end there. In 1929, archaeologist Sir Mortimer Wheeler, while excavating the Lydney Park site, became aware of the connection between the ring and the curse tablet. He needed help deciphering the name of the god, Nodens. So, he consulted an expert in Anglo-Saxon languages a professor at Oxford University named J.R.R. Tolkien. Yes, that Tolkien, the author of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Just a few years after his consultation with Wheeler, Tolkien published The Hobbit, a story centered around a powerful, magical ring inscribed with an ancient language, a ring that brings misfortune to its bearer, a ring that must be returned to its rightful place. Coincidence? Many don't think so. The Ring of Silvianus, with its tale of theft, curses, and a connection to one of the greatest fantasy writers of all time, has become an object of fascination. It's a tangible link to a world of Roman gods, ancient curses, and the very roots of modern fantasy. Today, the Ring of Silvianus resides at the Vine, now a National Trust property. It's displayed in its own dedicated room, alongside a copy of the Curse Tablet and, fittingly, a first edition of The Hobbit. It's a reminder of the enduring power of stories, the way the past can echo through the centuries, and how a simple gold ring can become a vessel for legend, mystery, and perhaps even a touch of magic. This is the Hope Diamond. It's a 45.52 carat, deep blue gem, the largest of its kind in the world. It's beautiful, it's priceless, and it's said to be cursed, leaving a trail of misery, madness, and death in its wake. This is the story of the Hope Diamond and the tragedies it may have wrought. The story starts not in a palace or a vault, but 1 billion years ago, 100 miles beneath the Earth's surface. There, immense pressure crushed carbon into a crystal, a common enough process. But in this instance, something rare occurred. Boron fused into the crystal structure, tinting it a deep, mesmerizing ocean blue. Eventually, volcanic activity pushed the gem closer to the surface, where, centuries ago, it was unearthed in India's legendary Kollur mine. India was once thought to be the only source of diamonds on Earth, which drew French merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier there in the mid-1600s. He made 6 incredible journeys to the area, and on one, he acquired a heart-shaped, 112-carat, rough-cut blue diamond. It was later named the Tavernier Violet, violet being another word for blue back then. Now some state that he stole it from the eye of the statue of a Hindu idol, but in fact, it was acquired the old-fashioned way. Tavernier later sold the stone, along with over 1,000 other diamonds, to King Louis XIV of France. The blue gem alone made up 25% of that total price. You see, the stone had something special about it. Tavernier himself, despite legends of him being ripped apart by dogs, lived a long and prosperous life, and he even spent his older days near the shores of Lake Geneva. King Louis XIV also enjoyed a good long life. He had the diamond cut down to a more fashionable 67 carats and set as the centerpiece of the French crown jewels, where it became known as the French blue. It remained in the royal family for generations, passing through the hands of kings without much of note happening. That is, until King Louis XVI, who was in power during the French Revolution. The French Revolution was, of course, a tumultuous time in France's history, and like many others, both the king and his wife, Marie Antoinette, lost their heads. The diamond is sometimes blamed for the queen's death, but in reality, she never actually wore it. So, this claim is thought to be spurious. The French blue was stolen in 1792, disappearing into the shadows of history, but only temporarily. 2 decades later, it resurfaced in London, in the possession of a gem merchant named Daniel Eliasson. It had been cut down again, this time to 44 carats, possibly to disguise it. There are some claims that it briefly fell into the hands of King George IV, but by 1839 it was firmly in the possession of a wealthy London banking family named Hope, and that's where it gets its most famous name. Thomas Hope brought the Hope diamond into the family. Then, after his death, it bounced down through heirs, wills and bankruptcies, like a gem in a pachinko machine. It went to a jewelry firm, then briefly to a Sergeant Habib on behalf of the Sultan of Turkey, who then ended up having financial problems and selling it once again. Finally, in 1920, Pierre Cartier of the famous jewelry family acquired it, and that's where the curse legend truly takes hold. By the early 20th century, the discovery of large diamond mines in South Africa had made diamonds far more accessible. They were no longer solely the domain of royalty and the extremely wealthy. Cartier, a savvy businessman, knew that to sell his unique blue diamond for the price he wanted, he needed more than just its beauty. He needed a story. So he began to promote the idea of the Hope diamond being cursed. He marked the price up substantially. There were already some newspapers that started hinting that the diamond had a dark history, and with novels like Wilkie Collins's The Moonstone and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Sign of the Four, this was an easy narrative to sell. Evelyn Walsh McLean, a wealthy American socialite, and her husband, Ned, were captivated by the story. They purchased the diamond in 1920 for $180,000, roughly $4.5 million today. Evelyn wore it to parties, sometimes on her head in a tiara-like setting, sometimes around her neck. She even, at times, let her dog wear it. She had it blessed by a priest, pawned it temporarily to help raise money for the Lindbergh baby, and was pretty open when it came to talking about the curse. Tragedy, however, did seem to follow. Her 9-year-old son was killed in a car accident. Her marriage to Ned ended in divorce, and he later died in a sanitarium. Another of her children tragically took their own life. The headlines practically wrote themselves. After Evelyn's death in 1947, jeweler Harry Winston acquired the Hope diamond along with the rest of her collection. He toured it around North America before finally donating it to the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in 1958. Winston hoped to start a collection of American crown jewels and perhaps gain a sizable tax break. And that's where the diamond now resides, from the mantle of the earth to now the US Capitol. Today, the Hope diamond sits in the Janet Annenberg Hooker Hall of Geology, Gems and Minerals at the Smithsonian. It's in a rotating case, allowing visitors to get mere inches away, if you can fight through the crowds that constantly surround it. The diamond is arguably the most popular item in the entire museum. Some claim that due to its inclusion, it has now cursed the entire country. However, the more likely theory is that anyone who is wealthy enough to own a diamond of this magnitude probably already has a whole host of unique issues. Evelyn Walsh McLean wrote that the natural consequence of unearned wealth in undisciplined hands. These are Maori Taonga. The word translates to treasured items, and they encompass a vast range of objects, intricately carved weapons, ancestral heirlooms, sacred masks, even burial grounds and natural resources. They are deeply connected to the Maori people of New Zealand, imbued with spiritual power, and some say, protected by powerful curses. This is their story. The story takes us to Wellington, New Zealand, to the Te Papa Tongareva Museum, the National Museum of New Zealand. Te Papa Tongareva translates roughly to container of treasures. These treasures, these taonga, are more than just artifacts. They're living links to the past, embodiments of ancestors and vessels of mana, spiritual power and authority. In Maori culture, certain objects, places, and even people can be tapu, sacred, restricted, and imbued with a potent spiritual force. To violate tapu is to invite misfortune, disaster, even death. It's where we get the English word taboo, thanks to the explorer Captain James Cook. Think of it like this. A tapu object is like a live wire. Handle it correctly, with respect and reverence, and it's safe. Mishandle it, and you risk a devastating shock. And that's what nearly happened back in October of 2010. The Te Papa Museum was planning a behind-the-scenes tour of some of their Maori taonga. Now, normally, these kinds of things have your standard rules. You know, no touching, no flash photography, comfortable shoes are recommended, etc. However, there was an extra stipulation added by the museum. They announced that pregnant and menstruating women were asked to refrain from participating. And that's when all hell broke loose. The public outcry was immediate and intense. Accusations of sexism and discrimination flew. The museum, however, stood its ground, explaining that the restriction wasn't arbitrary. It was rooted in Maori traditions and beliefs, specifically surrounding the concept of tapu. Many of the taonga, the museum explained, were weapons that had seen battle, that had taken lives. In Maori culture, when a warrior, a toa, dies in battle, their spirit is believed to enter the instrument of their death. These weapons, therefore, were not just inanimate objects. They were vessels of powerful, potentially volatile spirits, and therefore extremely tapu. Pregnant and menstruating women are also considered tapu in Maori culture, but in a different way. They are in a heightened state of spiritual power, associated with creation and the life force. Bringing two different types of tapu into close proximity, the museum argued, could be dangerous, a violation that could unleash unforeseen consequences, a curse. The controversy raged. The museum, facing mounting pressure, eventually clarified that the restriction was a suggestion, not a prohibition. Women could choose to participate, but they were advised of the potential risks. And then, strangely, the story just stops. Accounts detail the lead-up to the controversy, the museum's response, the public outcry. But there's little information about what happened after the guidelines were relaxed. Did any women defy the suggestion? Did anything happen? We don't know. But we do know what happened to the museum in the following years. In 2015, the museum discovered that many of the artifacts on open display had been damaged by visitors touching them. In 2016, a fire sprinkler system malfunctioned, damaging some priceless artifacts. Later that same year, a powerful earthquake rocked the entire building. And in 2018, museum staff discovered that the museum's impressive whalebone collection had become infested with a dangerous mold. Coincidence? Perhaps. The result of cost-cutting measures and deferred maintenance? Possibly. Or could it have been the result of violated tapu, of a curse unleashed by a clash of spiritual forces? The Maori taonga remind us that objects can hold more than just physical form. They can carry stories, beliefs, and power that transcend the tangible world. And sometimes those forces demand respect. A respect that, when ignored, can have very real, very scary consequences. Graveyards. They are places of remembrance, final resting spots, grounds filled with silent stones marking lives lived. But what if some of these memorials, these statues and headstones, held more than just memories? What if they harbored something darker, something ancient, a chilling curse? Today, we journey into the realm of these silent sentinels. We'll uncover the tale of a towering bronze statue, once a cemetery's pride, now notorious for bringing madness and death to those who dared to touch it. A massive runestone, etched with an ancient Viking threat, promising a gruesome end to any who disturb its slumber. The grand tomb of a brutal conqueror, whose opening was said to unleash a terror that shook the world. Another imposing angel, once gleaming gold, now a blackened figure, said to blind those who meet its gaze and bring death to those who touch it. A simple gravestone, stained with the mark of a violent crime, that seemed to drag 5 souls to their doom through a terrifying chain of events. And finally, a haunting statue in the legendary Sleepy Hollow, a bronze lady whose sorrow is rumored to bring nightmares and misfortune to any who disrespect her. These aren't just markers of the departed. They are objects linked to chilling legends of misfortune, supernatural vengeance and death. These are their terrifying stories. This is the Black Aggie, or rather, this is where she used to stand. A towering bronze statue, cloaked in shadow and surrounded by whispers of death, madness, and misfortune. Once a prominent feature of Druid Ridge Cemetery in Maryland, the Black Aggie was more than just a funerary monument. She was a magnet for dark legends, a focal point for fear, and, some say, a genuinely cursed object. This is her unsettling story. Druid Ridge Cemetery in Pikesville, Maryland. The name itself evokes a sense of ancient mystery, of druids and ritualistic practices. And the Black Aggie, for many years, was the embodiment of that dark mystique. Picture a 6-foot-tall bronze figure, seated on a stone pedestal, shrouded in a heavy cloak. Her eyes are closed, her head bowed, her hand resting beneath her chin in a posture of mourning, or perhaps something more sinister. The statue, originally, wasn't black. It was a shimmering bronze, a copy of a famous funerary sculpture called Grief, created by Augustus St. Gaudens for the grave of Marion Clover Adams, the wife of Henry Adams. The Black Aggie was commissioned by General Felix Agnus, a Civil War veteran and newspaper publisher, for his family plot in Druid Ridge. He hired sculptor Edward Porsche to create the unauthorized replica, much to the outrage of St. Gaudens' widow. But over time, exposed to the elements, the bronze darkened, taking on a deep, almost black patina. And as the statue's color changed, so did its reputation. The Black Aggie, as it became known, began to attract a different kind of attention. Not admiration for its artistry, but fear and fascination with its supposed curse. The legends surrounding the Black Aggie are numerous and chilling. It was said that her eyes glowed red at night, and that anyone who looked directly into them would be struck blind. Pregnant women were warned to avoid her shadow, lest they suffer a miscarriage. The spirits of the dead were said to gather around her at night, holding silent, spectral meetings. And the most persistent legend of all, anyone who dared to sit on the Black Aggie's lap would die. Teenagers, drawn by the thrill of the forbidden, would sneak into the cemetery at night, daring each other to touch the statue, to sit on its lap, to test the curse. Stories circulated of strange occurrences, of sudden illnesses, of unexplained accidents, of madness and death, all attributed to the Black Aggie's wrath. One particularly gruesome story tells of a fraternity pledge dared to spend the night with the statue. The next morning, he was found dead, crushed in the Aggie's arms. Another states that a sheet metal worker had to cut the arm off the statue in 1962. He later reported that the statue had actually ripped it off and handed it to him. Things got so bad, so many people trespassed at night, that in 1967, the Agnes family had had enough. The constant vandalism, the relentless stream of thrill-seekers, and the increasingly disturbing legends, it was too much. They donated the Black Aggie to the Smithsonian. But the story doesn't end there. The Smithsonian, recognizing the statue as an unauthorized copy, didn't want to display it. The Black Aggie was relegated to a basement storage area, hidden from view, as if they were trying to contain its dark influence. Years later, after the Smithsonian acquired an official copy of Grief, the cursed statue, having been rejected, ended up in the courtyard of the Howard T. Markey National Courts building in Washington, D.C., courtesy of the General Services Administration. There she sits today, no longer surrounded by the hushed whispers of a cemetery, but by the bustle of the nation's capital. And although she's more accessible than ever, the legends persist. People still claim to feel a chill in her presence, to sense a lingering darkness, a hint of the malevolence that once made her the terror of Druid Ridge. Is the Black Aggie truly cursed? Or is it simply a striking, albeit unauthorized, work of art, transformed by time, weather, and the human need to create stories, to explain the unexplainable, to find darkness where there is only bronze and shadow? Perhaps. But one thing is certain. The Black Aggie, whether cursed or not, remains a potent symbol of our fascination with death, the supernatural, and the enduring power of a good, scary story. This is the Black Angel of Oakland Cemetery, once an 8.5-foot tall, shimmering bronze memorial to lost loved ones. Today, it is a blackened, terrifying figure surrounded by deathly legends. They say that just touching it, and especially kissing it, could be the last thing you ever do. This is its horrifying story. Oakland Cemetery in Iowa City, Iowa, was established way back in 1843. It covers about 40 acres, is Protestant, and is filled with the usual sights: plain, rectangular tombstones and the quiet presence of the dead. For the most part, it's nothing out of the ordinary as far as cemeteries go, except for the giant Black Angel dominating the landscape and terrifying visitors. Angel statues in cemeteries are extremely common. Millions spread their stone wings over the dead across America and Europe. But not the Black Angel. The Black Angel has transcended blandness by going full-on spooky. And being full-on spooky in a cemetery has earned it an abundance of creepy legends. The statue itself stands 8.5 feet tall, standing atop a square pedestal that lifts it to a full 13 feet. It depicts a winged woman in a flowing dress, her head tilted down so that her face is usually lost in shadow. Her massive wings are at odd asymmetrical angles, one extended out perpendicular to her body, the other drooping like it's broken. Her arms are aligned with her wings, giving the strange impression that she's wearing fake wings strapped to her arms. There's something rounded and clay-like about her features. She looks like she belongs in a fantasy cemetery in a Tim Burton movie instead of in a real death cemetery in Iowa. The bronze artwork was crafted by Mario Korbel, a Czech sculptor based in Chicago. When it was placed in the cemetery in the early 1910s, it shone golden and glorious. Rodina Felderwertova is inscribed on the front of the stone pedestal, which means the Feldewert family in Czech. It is accompanied by a tall stone carved into the shape of a tree trunk. This Iowa plot is the lasting work of Teresa Feldevert, a Czech midwife. The stone tree came first and was planted to memorialize her son from her first marriage, Edward Dolezal. He died at age 18 after contracting meningitis. It was the second son she lost. The first, Otto, died 2 weeks before she moved to the United States. Childless and husbandless, Teresa left Iowa City and lived in a few different places before ending up in Eugene, Oregon, where she met Nicholas Feldevert, whom she eventually married. He preceded her in death and left her somewhat wealthy. One of the first things she did with that money was commission the angel sculpture. She ended up fighting with Corbel because she wanted the tree trunk gravestone to be incorporated into the sculpture of the angel. But in the end, they were kept separate. Regardless, the angel became the repository of the remains of both her son, Edward, and her husband. Finally, in 1924, Teresa herself was laid to rest beneath the angel she had commissioned. It's a beautiful story, each family member succumbing to the inevitable, and then being reunited beneath a shining statue for all to see. But then the angel aged, and the red gold bronze oxidized to deep black, as if dark forces had tainted it, corrupted it, cursed it. Normally, we call those forces time and weather. But in this case, because of the stature of the statue and the strange angle of its wings, and the fact that it doesn't fit in with the rest of the cemetery, and because it's in a cemetery in the first place, the change in color seems malevolent. Some say it was the addition of Teresa's ashes that cursed the statue, that she had cheated on her husband, and that the glowing angel looming above the ostensibly loving family could no longer take part in the ruse. However, the angel started turning black within 10 years of being installed, while Teresa was still alive. The Black Angel has accrued as many stories as there are paranormal books and websites. The most common story is that if you touch the statue, you'll die. And for whatever reason, touching is often specifically called out as kissing. Also, if a pregnant woman crosses through the shadow of the Black Angel, the woman will miscarry. It's a common enough legend that pregnant women in general might want to avoid graveyards. A man is said to have gone mad after breaking off the statue's thumbs, and in fact, she is missing a few digits. Another myth is that if a virgin is kissed in front of the statue, it will restore the Black Angel to her previous glowing form, although we can probably guess why that legend started. It's also said that every Halloween, the statue grows blacker. It's a popular spook spot for thrill seekers and paranormal investigators, a rite of passage for students, and, according to some locals, an icon of the city. What it is more than anything can be found in the last 2 lines of the epitaph on the stone tree trunk beside the Black Angel. "Do not weep for me, dear mother. I am at peace in my cool grave." The Black Angel is definitely a cool grave. This is the Bronze Lady. She sits in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery in the shadow of the legendary Headless Horseman. But while the horseman is a creature of fiction, the Bronze Lady is very real, and some say she's very cursed. This is her story, a tale of a haunting, a grieving widow, and a statue that seems to possess a life and a darkness all its own. The statue itself is striking. Larger than life, it depicts a seated woman, draped in flowing robes, her head bowed, her eyes closed. Unlike many of the weathered, crumbling monuments in the cemetery, the Bronze Lady is a deep, dark bronze, almost black, giving her an air of somber elegance. She sits between 2 pine trees, facing a grand mausoleum. not looking out at the world, but guarding the tomb within. The mausoleum belongs to General Samuel Russell Thomas, a Civil War veteran who made his fortune in iron, coal, and railroads. The statue, commissioned by his widow, Anne Augusta Porter Thomas, after his death in 1903, is titled Recueillement, French for contemplation or remembrance. It was created by sculptor Andrew O'Connor Jr., and the model was a woman named Jess Phoebe Brown. But the creation of the statue was not without its drama. According to accounts, when Mrs. Thomas first saw the sculpture, she was unhappy. She wanted the figure to appear more hopeful, more joyful, reflecting a belief in a peaceful afterlife. O'Connor, a temperamental artist, agreed to make changes. When Mrs. Thomas returned, he presented her with a new version of the head with a smiling, serene expression. She declared it perfect. And then O'Connor smashed the new head to pieces, declaring that he would never allow such a monstrosity to leave his studio. The original grieving figure remained, and it's that figure, that expression of profound sorrow, that has become the source of so many unsettling legends. People claim to have heard weeping coming from the statue. Others have felt actual tears on her bronze cheeks. Teenagers, drawn by the spooky stories, sneak into the cemetery at night, daring each other to touch her, to sit on her lap, to peer into the keyhole of the mausoleum she guards. The legends are chilling. They say that if you knock on the mausoleum door or look through the keyhole, you'll be plagued by nightmares. That if you disrespect the statue, kick it, spit on it, slap its face, she will haunt you for the rest of your life. Some even claim to have seen a red eye staring back at them from the keyhole after abusing the statue. Is the bronze lady truly cursed? Or is it simply the power of suggestion, the eerie atmosphere of the cemetery, the weight of grief and loss that hangs heavy in the air? Perhaps it's the way she's positioned, not as a monument to be admired, but as a silent guardian, her gaze fixed on the tomb she protects. Whatever the explanation, the bronze lady of Sleepy Hollow remains a powerful, unsettling presence. She's a reminder that even in death, even in stone and bronze, there can be a lingering energy, a sense of mystery, and a darkness that can chill the blood and fuel the imagination for generations to come. And maybe a warning to those who would disturb the peace of the dead. This is the story of a gravestone. Not just any gravestone, but one said to be so cursed, so malevolent, that it killed not one, not two, but 5 people, each death more gruesome than the last. This is the terrifying tale of the gravestone of Carl Pruitt and the chain of death that followed in its wake. Our story takes us to Pulaski County, Kentucky, in 1938. Picture a small rural community, a place where life moved at a slower pace, where secrets could fester, and where a single act of violence could unleash a chain of events that would defy explanation. Carl Pruitt, a carpenter, returned home early one day to find his wife in bed with another man. Enraged, he attacked, not with a gun or a knife, but with a length of chain. He strangled his wife, his fury culminating in a brutal, senseless murder. Then, consumed by guilt and despair, Pruitt took his own life. A tragic story, yes, but one that, sadly, isn't uncommon. What is uncommon is what happened next. Pruitt was buried in a local cemetery, his grave marked by a simple headstone. And it was that headstone that became the focal point of a terrifying legend. locals began to notice something strange about the gravestone. Over time, a section of it discolored, darkening, taking on the distinct shape of a chain, as if the very instrument of his crime had been imprinted upon the stone. And that's when the deaths began. First, there was a young man, part of a group that was messing around in the cemetery. The young man threw rocks at the grave, and it chipped. He then got on his bike and left. Well, somehow, his bike chain ended up wrapping around his neck, and he was strangled to death. The boy's mother, devastated with grief, took matters into her own hands. She went down the cemetery with an axe and demolished the grave. Later that day, while doing chores, her clothesline, which was actually made of chain, wrapped around her neck and killed her. Another story tells of a farmer, skeptical of the curse, who fired his shotgun at the gravestone. His horses, startled by the blast, bolted, dragging him behind the cart. The reins, or rather the chains, wrapped around his neck, strangling him. Then there were the police officers, investigating the growing legend. One of them, dismissive of the curse, mocked the stone. As they drove away, their car swerved, crashing between two posts. The skeptical officer was killed, strangled by a chain that connected the posts. And finally, a man, fed up with the stories, determined to destroy the cursed stone once and for all, attacked it with a hammer and chisel. He was found dead the next morning, the chain from the cemetery gate wrapped tightly around his neck. 5 deaths, all linked to the gravestone, all involving strangulation by a chain. The small community was gripped by terror. People began to exhume the bodies of their loved ones, moving them to other cemeteries, desperate to escape the cursed ground. Eventually, the cemetery was abandoned, all but for one grave, Carl Pruitt's. The land was eventually sold to a mining company, and the area was turned into a strip mine. The gravestone, it's assumed, was destroyed, lost in the rubble, its curse finally broken. Or was it? The story of Carl Pruitt's gravestone is shrouded in mystery. There are no official records to confirm all the details, no newspaper accounts to verify the deaths. The earliest known written account of the legend appears in a book of Kentucky ghost stories published in the 1990s. But the legend persists, a chilling reminder of the power of belief, the way fear can take root and grow, and the way a simple object, a gravestone, can become a symbol of something far more terrifying than death itself. It's a story that reminds us that sometimes the most dangerous things aren't the monsters under the bed, but the darkness that resides within us, the violence we inflict, and the curses we create. This is the Gur-e-Amir, the tomb of Timur, also known as Tamerlane. He was one of history's most brutal conquerors, a 14th century warlord who built an empire on mountains of skulls and rivers of blood. But his tomb, located in Samarkand, Uzbekistan, is also said to be cursed, and some believe that disturbing his remains unleashed a terror even greater than Timur himself, Adolf Hitler, and the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. This is the story of Timur's tomb, and the chilling curse it may have unleashed. Born in 1336 in what is now Uzbekistan, Timur rose from relatively humble beginnings to become the scourge of Central Asia. He claimed descent from Genghis Khan, and he seemed determined to emulate, even surpass, the Mongol emperor in ruthlessness and ambition. He carved out an empire that stretched from the Mediterranean to India, from the Caucasus to the Arabian Sea. He was a brilliant military strategist, a ruthless warrior, and a patron of the arts and sciences. But he was also incredibly brutal. He massacred entire cities, built towers from the skulls of his victims, and left a trail of devastation wherever he went. Some estimate that his campaigns resulted in the deaths of 17 million people, about 5% of the world's population at the time. In 1405, while on his way to conquer China, Timur died. His body was brought back to Samarkand, the capital of his empire, and interred in the magnificent Gur-e-Amir mausoleum, a stunning structure with a towering ribbed turquoise dome. It was meant to be a testament to his power, a symbol of his eternal glory. But it also became the source of a chilling legend. The first hint of a curse associated with Timur came centuries later, in 1740. Nadir Shah, a Persian warlord inspired by Timur's conquests, stole the large jade slab that marked Timur's grave. Soon after, bad luck plagued Nadir Shah, and supposedly he was advised to return the stone. But the truly terrifying part of the story unfolds in the 20th century, during the height of World War II. In 1941, Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, intrigued by Timur's legend, ordered an expedition to open the tomb. Despite protests from local religious leaders who warned of dire consequences, a team of Soviet anthropologists, led by Mikhail Gerasimov, exhumed Timur's remains on June 19th. They confirmed that the body matched the descriptions of Timur, a tall man for his time, with injuries to his right leg and hand, which gave him the name Timur the Lame. The scientists took the remains to Moscow for further analysis, where Gerasimov even reconstructed Timur's face from his skull. And then, on June 22nd, 1941, just 3 days after Timur's tomb was opened, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. The largest military invasion in history, it marked the beginning of the bloodiest chapter of World War II. The timing was too striking to ignore. Rumors spread like wildfire. It was said that an inscription on Timur's tomb warned, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble." Another, supposedly found inside the casket, proclaimed, "Whosoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." Now, there's no actual evidence of these inscriptions existing, but the narrative took hold. The opening of Timur's tomb, the disturbance of his remains, had unleashed Hitler, a force of destruction that dwarfed even Timur's bloody legacy. And here's where the story takes another twist. In 1942, as the brutal Battle of Stalingrad raged, Stalin, perhaps swayed by superstition or desperate for any advantage, ordered Timur's remains to be reinterred with full Islamic rituals. Shortly after, the Soviets achieved a decisive victory at Stalingrad, a turning point in the war. Coincidence? Or was there something more to the story? Was the timing of the Nazi invasion, so soon after the tomb's opening, truly a random event? Did the reburial of Timur somehow appease the ancient conqueror's spirit, turning the tide of the war? We may never know for sure. The legend of Timur's curse, like the man himself, is shrouded in mystery and violence. But it serves as a chilling reminder of the power of belief, the enduring fear of disturbing the dead, and the unsettling way that history, legend, and superstition can intertwine, creating stories that continue to haunt us centuries later. It also makes you wonder, what if the rumors were true? This is the Björketorp runestone. Standing tall and imposing in a remote corner of Sweden, it's one of the tallest runestones in the world. But it's not just its size that makes it remarkable. Inscribed upon its surface, in ancient runes, is a chilling curse, a threat of death and destruction, a warning from a long-dead past. This is the story of the Björketorp runestone, and the violent curse it carries. The Björketorp runestone stands in Blekinge, Sweden, in an ancient burial ground, a landscape dotted with standing stones called menhirs, remnants of the Iron Age. These stones date back to the 6th or 7th century, a time of Vikings, of warriors and raiders, of powerful beliefs and brutal realities. The runestone itself is part of a group of 3, arranged in a rough triangle, a silent sentinel amidst the wind-swept landscape. But what sets the Björketorp runestone apart is the inscription carved into its surface. Written in Proto-Norse, the ancestor of the Old Norse language spoken by the Vikings, it's a message that chills the blood even today. On one side, almost invisible now due to weathering, are the words, "I predict perdition." A simple statement, yet ominous, a foreboding of doom. But it's the inscription on the other side that truly reveals the stone's dark purpose. It reads, "I, master of the runes, conceal here runes of power, incessantly plagued by maleficence, doomed to insidious death, is he who breaks this monument. I prophesy destruction." It's a curse, stark and brutal, a direct threat to anyone who would dare to disturb the stone. No subtle warnings here, no veiled threats. This is a promise of pain, of suffering, of a slow and agonizing end. And unlike other rune stones, where curses might be an addition, the curse is the message. But what is the stone protecting? Is it a grave? A shrine? A boundary marker? The truth is, we don't know for sure. There are theories, of course. Some believe it marks the burial site of a powerful chieftain or warrior. Others suggest it was a cenotaph, a memorial for someone who died far from home. Still, others believe it was a sacred site, dedicated to Odin, the Allfather of the Norse gods. There's a local legend about a farmer. As the story goes, a farmer once sought to clear the land for planting, and that included the runestone. He stacked firewood all around the base, planning to heat up the stone, then pour cold water on it. He thought the change in temperature would cause the stone to crack, making removal easier. However, as he lit the fire, the wind shifted. The small fire was extinguished, but the farmer caught on fire and burned to death. Whatever its original purpose, the Björketorp runestone stands as a testament to the power of belief, the fear of the unknown, and the enduring human fascination with curses. It's a reminder of a time when words had weight, when symbols held power, and when the wrath of the gods, or the wrath of those who claimed to speak for them, was a very real and terrifying thing. And interestingly, about 35 miles away, there's a second runestone called the Stentoften runestone, and it bears almost the exact same curse. It's now located in a local church after having been discovered in 1823. So, the next time you're wandering through the Swedish countryside and you stumble upon a towering stone covered in strange runes, perhaps it's best to keep your distance. You never know what ancient curses might still linger, waiting to be unleashed. What if the ordinary things around us held something extraordinary? Something dark? A curse? From the intricate ancient gears of the Prague astronomical clock, a marvel said to bring ruin upon its creators and the city itself, to a melody so haunting it was dubbed the Hungarian suicide song. blamed for a wave of chilling deaths. The sleek, tragic Porsche of a Hollywood icon, a little bastard that seemingly left a trail of destruction even after its owner's demise. A seemingly innocuous phone number, a sequence of 8s linked to a string of violent ends, an 80s arcade game with a fatal high score where players allegedly dropped dead at the controls, and even the viral whispers of cursed chain emails spreading digital dread and misfortune through our inboxes. These objects, these concepts, are all tied to chilling legends of misfortune, madness, and death. They are stories woven into history, whispers of a terrifying power lurking just beneath the surface. These are those stories. This is the story of a car. Not just any car, but a 1955 Porsche 550 Spider. A sleek, silver machine built for speed, for power, for victory. But this particular car, nicknamed Little Bastard, would become associated not with triumph, but with tragedy, with a curse that claimed the life of a Hollywood icon and, some say, continued to wreak havoc long after the wreckage was cleared. This is the chilling tale of James Dean's cursed Porsche. James Dean, the rebel, the icon, the star who burned bright and fast, leaving behind a legacy that continues to captivate and inspire. He made only 3 major films: East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant. But in those few performances, he captured the spirit of a generation, the angst, the restlessness, the yearning for something more. And he loved speed. Dean was a passionate car enthusiast, a racer who found freedom and exhilaration behind the wheel. In 1955, he acquired his dream machine, a Porsche 550 Spider, one of only 90 ever made. It was a lightweight, agile, and incredibly fast car, designed for racing. He had it helmed customized, with the number 130 painted on the doors and hood, and the nickname Little Bastard scrawled across the rear. The car was, by all accounts, beautiful, but it also seemed to carry with it a sense of foreboding. Actor Alec Guinness, who met Dean shortly before his death, reportedly had a premonition about the car, warning Dean that if he got into it, he would be dead within a week. On September the 30th, 1955, Dean, accompanied by his mechanic, Rolf Wutherich, set out from Los Angeles, heading to a race in Salinas, California. He was driving the Little Bastard, eager to test its limits, to feel the thrill of speed. They never made it. On a highway near Cholome, California, a Ford Tudor, driven by a college student named Donald Turnipseed, made a left turn directly into Dean's path. The impact was catastrophic. The lightweight Porsche was demolished, twisted into a mangled wreck of metal. Wutherich was thrown from the car, surviving with serious injuries. Dean, however, was trapped inside, suffering fatal injuries. He was pronounced dead at the scene. He was just 24 years old. And that's where the legend of the cursed car truly begins. The wreckage of the Little Bastard, a twisted symbol of shattered dreams and untimely death, was sold to George Barris, a custom car builder who had worked on the vehicle for Dean. And from there, the stories began to circulate. Barris claimed that the car was cursed, that it brought misfortune and death to anyone who came into contact with it. He told stories of the car falling off trailers, crushing a mechanic's legs, and causing fires. He even claimed that thieves attempting to steal parts from the wreckage suffered gruesome injuries. The engine and other parts of the car were sold to other racers. Dr. William F. Eschrich put it in his Lotus 9, and it caused a crash. Another doctor, Troy McHenry, also put parts of the car into his. and crashed into a tree and died. The stories multiplied, each one adding another layer to the car's dark reputation. It was said that the wreckage was haunted, that strange noises could be heard coming from it, that it would move on its own. And then, the little bastard disappeared. Barris had loaned the wreckage to the National Safety Council, who used it as a macabre exhibit, touring it around the country to promote safe driving. But in the early 1960s, while being transported from Miami to Los Angeles, the car vanished. It was reportedly sealed in a boxcar, but when the train arrived at its destination, the car was gone. To this day, the whereabouts of the little bastard remain unknown. It's become a holy grail for car enthusiasts and paranormal investigators, a lost relic of a Hollywood legend, and a symbol of a curse that, some say, continues to linger. Is the little bastard truly cursed? Or is it simply a case of bad luck, amplified by the tragic death of a beloved star, and fueled by the human need to find meaning in tragedy, to create stories that explain the unexplainable? Perhaps the curse is simply a reflection of our own mortality, a reminder that even the most beautiful, the most powerful, the most seemingly invincible things can be destroyed in an instant, and that sometimes the legends we create, the stories we tell, are more enduring and more powerful than the objects themselves. There are also rumors that the car claimed one more life. Rolf Wutherich, Dean's mechanic, would later die in a car crash in 1981. This is the story of a video game, not a modern, hyper-realistic online multiplayer game, but a classic arcade cabinet from the 1980s, a game called Berserk. It was a simple, yet addictive game, where you navigate a maze, shooting robots and avoiding the dreaded Evil Otto. But this particular Berserk cabinet, located in a suburban Illinois arcade, was said to be more than just a game. It was said to be cursed, responsible for the deaths of at least 2 young men. This is its chilling and strangely compelling story. The 1980s, the golden age of arcade games. Imagine a dimly lit room filled with the cacophony of electronic sounds, the flashing lights of dozens of cabinets, and the excited shouts of teenagers battling aliens, racing cars, and navigating pixelated worlds. It was a social hub, a place of competition, and, for a brief, shining moment, the cutting edge of entertainment technology. And in the corner of one such arcade, Friar Tuck's game room in Calumet City, Illinois, stood a Berserk cabinet. Berserk, released in 1980 by Stern Electronics, was a relatively simple game by today's standards. You controlled a stick-figure humanoid, armed with a laser gun, navigating a maze filled with deadly robots. The robots, with their monotone synthesized voices, taunted you. "Intruder alert! Intruder alert! The humanoid must not escape. Get the humanoid." And if you lingered too long in a maze, the game's most terrifying feature would appear. Evil Otto, a bouncing, indestructible smiley face that relentlessly pursued you, ending your game with a single touch. It was a challenging, addictive game, and the Berserk cabinet at Friar Tuck's was a popular one. But soon, the arcade and the game would become associated with something far more sinister than pixelated robots and digitized taunts. The first tragedy occurred in 1981. A teenager named Jeff Daly, a skilled Berserk player, reportedly achieved a high score on the machine, entered his initials, and then collapsed. He died of a sudden heart attack right there in the arcade, surrounded by the flashing lights and electronic sounds of the game he'd just been playing. A year later, in 1982, it happened again. Another young man, Peter Burkowski, also a skilled Berserk player, reportedly achieved a high score, entered his initials, and then collapsed. He too died of a sudden heart attack, just moments after playing the game. Two young men, both seemingly healthy, both dying of heart attacks immediately after playing the same Berserk cabinet. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the stories began to circulate. The Berserk cabinet at Friar Tuck's, it was said, was cursed. It was a killer, a machine that somehow, inexplicably, claimed the lives of its players. Now, there's a lot of debate about the specifics of these stories. The story of Jeff Daly, in particular, is often dismissed as an urban legend, with no concrete evidence to support it. But the death of Peter Burkowski is well documented, and the timing, so soon after playing Berserk, is undeniably unsettling. An autopsy revealed that Burkowski had scarring on his heart, a pre-existing condition that likely made him vulnerable to a sudden cardiac event. The intense excitement of the game, the adrenaline rush, may have been enough to trigger a fatal arrhythmia. But the legend of the cursed Berserk cabinet persisted. Fueled by the eerie coincidence of the two deaths, the game's own ominous atmosphere, and the inherent human tendency to find patterns, to seek explanations for the unexplainable, even if those explanations veer into the realm of the supernatural. There is even another, less substantial death linked to the game. Another teenager supposedly got into a fight about the game, resulting in a stabbing and death. Friar Tuck's game room eventually closed down, a victim of the changing times, the rise of home consoles, and the decline of the arcade era. The fate of the Berserk cabinet is unknown. It may have been sold, scrapped, or perhaps it sits in storage somewhere, gathering dust, its deadly legend fading with time. Or maybe it's still out there. The story of the Berserk cabinet is a reminder of the power of urban legends, the way fear can take root and grow, and the way that even the most mundane objects, even a simple video game, can become imbued with a sense of darkness, of mystery, and of a curse that, whether real or imagined, continues to fascinate and terrify. This is the story of a curse that spreads, not through a physical object, but through the digital ether. It's a curse that arrives in your inbox, disguised as a harmless message, a plea for help, or a warning. But beneath the surface, there lies a threat, a promise of misfortune, and a chilling reminder that even in the age of the internet, ancient superstitions can still find a way to haunt us. This is the story of cursed chain emails. We've all received them. Chain emails. Those are annoying, often rambling messages that implore you to forward them to a certain number of people, promising good luck, financial rewards, or, more ominously, threatening dire consequences if you break the chain. Most of the time, they're harmless, a minor annoyance, a digital equivalent of junk mail. But sometimes they tap into something deeper, something darker, playing on our fears, our superstitions, and our innate desire to avoid misfortune. Before chain emails, there were chain letters. These letters were written with the intention of being sent to numerous people. But chain emails took the concept to a whole new level of virality. And sometimes, chain emails take a sinister turn, becoming vessels of curses, digital threats that promise death, disaster, or supernatural retribution if you fail to comply with their demands. These cursed chain emails often prey on our deepest fears, invoking ghosts, demons, or other malevolent entities. They tell stories of tragic deaths, of vengeful spirits, of curses that can only be broken by forwarding the message, by spreading the fear, by perpetuating the cycle. One popular example features a girl named Clarissa. It was said she was murdered and would come haunt whoever did not forward the email. Another tells of a young girl who was pushed down a sewer. Another features a character named Bloody Mary. And yet another uses the likeness of Mickey Mouse. The threats are often graphic, explicit, designed to shock and terrify. They promise that you'll be haunted, that you'll suffer unimaginable horrors, that you'll die a gruesome death. All if you fail to forward the email to a specific number of people within a certain time frame. They're the digital equivalent of a voodoo doll, a way to inflict harm, or at least the fear of harm, from a distance, using the power of words and the viral nature of the internet. Of course, there's no evidence that these cursed chain emails actually work. They're hoaxes, pranks, designed to scare and annoy. But their persistence, their ability to tap into our primal fears, is a testament to the enduring power of superstition, and the way that even in the age of technology, we remain susceptible to the whispers of the unknown. And the format is ever evolving. Chain letters became chain emails and are now common on social media. So, the next time you receive a chain email promising good luck or threatening dire consequences, remember the stories of the cursed messages. Remember the power of fear, the way it can spread, and the way that even the most seemingly harmless digital object can become a vessel for something darker, something more unsettling. Something that reminds us that even in the 21st century, the whispers of ancient curses can still find a way to reach us, to haunt us, and to make us question the boundaries between the real and the imagined. This is the story of a phone number. Not just any phone number, but a specific sequence of digits that, according to legend, is cursed, bringing death and misfortune to everyone who owned it. It's a story of the digital age, a chilling reminder that even in our hyper-connected world, there are still mysteries, still things that defy explanation, and still curses that can spread through the very technology we rely on. This is the tale of the cursed phone number, 0888 888 888. In a world dominated by technology, our phone numbers have become extensions of ourselves, digital identifiers that connect us to the world. We use them for everything, for work, for family, for social media, for ordering pizza. But what if your phone number could also be a conduit for something darker, something cursed? The story of 0888 888 888 begins in Bulgaria. It was a mobile phone number issued by the company Mobitel, now A1 Bulgaria. And on the surface, there's nothing particularly remarkable about it. It's just a string of digits. But it's the repetition of those digits, the sequence of eights, that, in some cultures, is considered lucky. But for the owners of this particular number, luck was the last thing they experienced. The first owner was Vladimir Grashnov, the former CEO of Mobitel. He died of cancer in 2001, at the relatively young age of 48. A tragic event, certainly, but not necessarily unusual. Then the number was reassigned to Konstantin Dimitrov, a Bulgarian mafia boss. In 2003, Dimitrov was gunned down in the Netherlands while reportedly inspecting his drug-smuggling empire. He had the phone with him when he died. The number then passed to Konstantin Dishlev, a real estate agent with, shall we say, connections to organized crime. In 2005, Dishlev was shot dead outside an Indian restaurant in Sofia, Bulgaria. It turned out he was also running a massive cocaine trafficking operation. 3 owners, 3 deaths. All sudden, all violent, all connected to the same phone number, 0888 888 888. The story, understandably, began to circulate. The phone number, it was said, was cursed. Anyone who possessed it was doomed to meet a tragic end. The Bulgarian media dubbed it the cursed mobile number. Mobitel, faced with a growing public relations nightmare, reportedly suspended the number. They wouldn't comment on the rumors, the deaths, or the supposed curse, stating only that they don't discuss individual phone numbers. And there, the story might have ended. A curious coincidence, a string of tragedies linked by a simple sequence of digits. But the internet, as it always does, kept the legend alive. Today, if you try to call 0888 888 888, you'll get a recorded message stating that the number is outside network coverage. It's become a digital ghost story, a modern-day urban legend fueled by the power of the internet and the human fascination with the unexplained. Is the number truly cursed? Or is it simply a case of coincidence, of 3 men involved in dangerous activities meeting predictable ends? It's impossible to say for sure, but the story of this phone number serves as a chilling reminder of the way technology can become intertwined with our fears, our superstitions, and our enduring fascination with the dark side of the digital world. It's a reminder that even in the age of smartphones and instant communication, there are still things we cannot explain, still mysteries that defy logic, and still curses that can spread through the very networks that connect us all. And the legend isn't confined to this phone number. There are several others thought to also be cursed. In fact, repeating numbers, and even numbers with patterns, are thought to be bad luck. This is the Prague Horloge, also known as the Prague Astronomical Clock. It's a masterpiece of medieval engineering, a complex and beautiful mechanism that has been tracking time, the stars, and the zodiac for over 600 years. But this isn't just a clock. It's also said to be cursed, linked to tales of madness, death, and misfortune, a chilling legend woven into the very fabric of Prague's history. This is its story. Prague's Old Town Square, a bustling hub of activity filled with tourists, street performers, and the aroma of Tredelnik pastries. And dominating the square, on the side of the Old Town Hall, is the Horloge. It's a breathtaking sight, a riot of color, intricate carvings, and moving figures. It's more than just a pretty face, though. This is a working astronomical clock built in 1410. It displays multiple types of time: Old Bohemian time, Babylonian time, Central European time, and even sidereal time, which measures the rotation of the Earth relative to the stars. It tracks the position of the sun, the moon, the constellations of the zodiac. It's a marvel of medieval engineering, a testament to human ingenuity and a fascination with the cosmos. And every hour, on the hour, it comes alive. Wooden figures, representing the 12 apostles, parade past the windows above the clock face. Other figures, representing vice and virtue, nod their heads. And then there's the skeleton, a figure of death, that rings a bell and inverts an hourglass. A stark reminder of the passage of time and the inevitability of mortality. But beneath the beauty, beneath the intricate mechanics, there lies a darker story, a legend of a curse. The most common version of the curse story centers around a clockmaker named Master Hanush, who, according to legend, was commissioned to build the orloi. The city councillors, so impressed by his creation, were terrified that he might build an even grander clock for another city. So, in a brutal act of preventative measures, they had him blinded, ensuring that he could never replicate his masterpiece. In revenge, the blinded Hanush, with the help of an apprentice, sabotaged the clock, cursing it and, by extension, the city of Prague. The legend states that anyone who tries to repair the clock, or even tamper with it, will go mad or die. Now, the story of Master Hanush is largely a myth. Historical records show that the clock was actually created by Mikuláš of Kadaň and Jan Schindel. Hanush did work on the clock, but almost a century later. But the legend, the curse, persisted, woven into the fabric of the orloge's history. And over the centuries, there have been incidents, strange occurrences that have fueled the belief in the curse. The clock has stopped working many times, sometimes due to mechanical failures, sometimes due to neglect, and sometimes due to more dramatic events. And each time, it seemed, misfortune followed. There are also other beliefs. It's said that the first chime of the clock each day will chase away any evil spirits, and also that if a boy is born on New Year's Eve and runs to the clock before the skeleton stops nodding, it will undo the curse. The most significant event linked to the curse occurred during World War II. Prague was occupied by the Nazis, and during the Prague Uprising in 1945, the Old Town Hall and the Orloge were severely damaged by a firebomb. Some believe that the clock's temporary malfunction during this time led to the Nazi occupation. The clock was eventually repaired, painstakingly restored to its former glory, and today it continues to tick, to chime, to draw crowds of awestruck tourists. But the legend of the curse remains, a chilling undercurrent to the clock's beauty and complexity. Is the Prague Orloge truly cursed? Or is it simply a victim of circumstance, a historical artifact caught in the crosscurrents of war, neglect, and the human tendency to weave stories, to find patterns where there may be only coincidence? Perhaps the answer doesn't matter. The legend of the cursed clock, like the intricate mechanism itself, has become a part of Prague's identity, a reminder of the city's rich and often turbulent history, and a testament to the enduring power of stories to shape our perception of the world around us. And it's a reminder that even the most beautiful, the most intricate creations can carry with them a shadow, a hint of darkness, and a whisper of a curse that can chill the blood and fuel the imagination for centuries to come. What if the old, forgotten items tucked away in an attic weren't just dusty relics? What if some pieces of decor, seemingly innocent, carried with them a chilling history, a dark energy, a terrifying curse? Today, we're opening the door to stories of such objects. We're talking about unsettling paintings of a crying boy, artworks that mysteriously survive the very fires they're blamed for. An antique chair, inviting but deadly, said to bring a swift and fatal rest to anyone who dares to sit upon it. A simple wooden wine cabinet, whispered to hold a malevolent spirit. A tale so infamous it inspired a Hollywood horror movie. A beautiful silver vase passed from one tragedy to another, its touch rumored to be lethal. The glittering ring of a beloved Hollywood star that seemed to bring only heartbreak and an untimely end. Another notorious chair, cursed by a condemned man, promising death to all who use it, and a heavy chest of drawers born from cruelty and revenge that haunted a family for generations. These aren't just household items. They are objects tied to chilling tales of misfortune, madness, and death. These are their terrifying stories. This is the story of a ring, a seemingly ordinary piece of jewelry, a gold band set with a semi-precious stone. But this isn't just any ring. It's said to be cursed, linked to the tragic downfall and untimely death of a Hollywood legend, and a string of misfortunes that followed those who dared to wear it. This is the story of Rudolph Valentino's cursed ring. The story begins in the 1920s, at the height of Valentino's fame. Rudolph Valentino was the Latin lover, a heartthrob who captivated audiences with his smoldering gaze and exotic charm. While browsing in a San Francisco jewelry shop, he was drawn to a particular ring, a gold band with a large cabochon-cut gem, sometimes described as a cat's eye or tiger's eye stone. According to legend, the shop owner warned Valentino not to buy it, telling him that it was cursed, that it brought misfortune to all who owned it. But Valentino, a star at the peak of his power, was not one to be deterred by superstition. He bought the ring, dismissing the warning as nonsense, and for a time, it seemed he was right. He wore the ring proudly, even featuring it in one of his films, The Young Rajah. But then, things began to change. Valentino's career, once unstoppable, started to falter. His films began to flop. His personal life was plagued by scandal and heartbreak. And then, in 1926, at the age of just 31, Rudolph Valentino died. The official cause of death was peritonitis, brought on by a perforated ulcer. But many believed there was more to the story. They pointed to the ring, to the shopkeeper's warning, to the string of misfortunes that had plagued Valentino in the years since he'd acquired it. The curse, it seemed, had claimed its first victim. But the story doesn't end with Valentino's death. The ring, now imbued with a dark and terrifying reputation, passed from hand to hand, leaving a trail of tragedy in its wake. Pola Negri, a silent film star and one of Valentino's lovers, inherited the ring. Shortly afterward, her career declined and she suffered a serious illness. She gave the ring to Russ Columbo, a singer known as the Radio Valentino. Well, in 1934, he was shot in the head and killed. Next, the ring passes to Columbo's friend, Joe Casino, then to his brother, and was promptly stolen. The thief was then apprehended by police and shot to death. Then a man named Jack Dunn was set to play Valentino in a biopic and wore the ring. He promptly died. And finally, the ring disappeared. Some say it's locked away in a safety deposit box in Los Angeles, its curse contained. Others claim it was stolen, lost, or perhaps destroyed. Is the ring truly cursed? Or is it simply a case of coincidence, of bad luck amplified by the power of suggestion and the allure of a good, tragic story? It's difficult to say. The deaths and misfortunes associated with the ring are undeniable, but attributing them to a supernatural force is a leap of faith. But the legend of Rudolph Valentino's cursed ring persists, a chilling reminder of the fragility of fame, the capriciousness of fortune, and the enduring human fascination with the dark side of glamour. It's a story that reminds us that even the most beautiful, most desirable objects can carry with them a shadow, a hint of danger, and a whisper of a curse that can chill the blood and fuel the imagination for generations to come. This is the Dybbuk box, a small, unassuming wooden wine cabinet. It looks like something you might find at a flea market or in your grandparents' attic. But this isn't just any box. It's said to be haunted, possessed by a Dybbuk, a malicious spirit from Jewish folklore. And its story, a bizarre mix of online auctions, paranormal investigations, and Hollywood horror, is one of the strangest and most unsettling in the world of cursed objects. The story begins not in some ancient, dusty synagogue, but on eBay in 2003. A man named Kevin Mannis, a furniture restorer, listed a peculiar item for sale: a vintage wine cabinet he'd acquired at an estate sale in Portland, Oregon. But this wasn't a typical eBay listing. Mannis described the box as being haunted, plagued by strange occurrences, and responsible for a string of misfortunes that had befallen him and those around him. He claimed the box had belonged to a Holocaust survivor who had warned him never to open it. But of course, Mannis did open it. And what he found inside was a collection of odd, seemingly unrelated items. 2 1920s wheat pennies, 2 locks of hair, a small granite statue engraved with the Hebrew word shalom, a dried rosebud, a golden wine cup, and a cast-iron candlestick holder. From the moment he opened the box, Mannis claimed, things started to go wrong. His shop was vandalized. He was plagued by nightmares. He smelled strange odors. He saw shadowy figures. And everyone he gave the box to, including his own mother, who suffered a stroke shortly after receiving it, experienced similar misfortunes. Desperate to rid himself of the box, Mannis turned to eBay, hoping to find someone, anyone, who might understand what he was dealing with, someone who might be willing to take the cursed object off his hands. And his detailed, incredibly specific listing, filled with chilling anecdotes and a palpable sense of desperation, caught the attention of the internet. The Dybbuk box, as it became known, went viral, long before going viral was even a common phrase. It became an online legend, a modern-day ghost story fueled by the power of the internet. The box was sold first to a college student named Iosif Nitske, who reported even more intense paranormal activity: hair loss, strange smells, electronic devices malfunctioning, and terrifying visions. He too listed the box on eBay, adding his own experiences to the growing legend. The next owner was Jason Haxton, a museum curator in Missouri. Haxton, intrigued by the box's story, documented his experiences, claiming that it caused him physical ailments, but also, strangely, that it reversed his aging process, calling it his fountain of youth. He wrote a book about the Dybbuk box, further amplifying its legend. And then, Hollywood came calling. The Dybbuk box became the inspiration for the 2012 horror movie The Possession, turning a bizarre online phenomenon into a mainstream horror franchise. But the story doesn't end there. In 2017, Zach Bagans, star of the paranormal reality show Ghost Adventures, acquired the Dybbuk box for his haunted museum in Las Vegas. It's now one of the museum's star attractions, housed in its own room, encased in glass and surrounded by a protective circle of salt. Visitors are warned not to touch the case, not to provoke the spirit within. And in a final, strange twist, Bagans even released security camera footage of rapper Post Malone encountering the box and appearing deeply uncomfortable before abruptly leaving. Shortly afterward, Malone experienced a series of unfortunate events: a plane emergency, a car accident, a home invasion, leading some to speculate that he, too, had fallen victim to the Dybbuk box's curse. But here's the thing. Before Kevin Mannis's eBay listing, There was no such thing as a dybbuk box in Jewish folklore. Dybbuks, yes, these are restless, malicious spirits, believed to cling to the living. But the idea of a dybbuk being trapped inside a box? That was a modern invention, a creation of the internet age. It has even been reported that the box was not an antique, but was rather built in the mid-1900s. The dybbuk box is a fascinating example of how a legend can be born, how a story can take on a life of its own, fueled by fear, fascination, and the power of the internet. It's a reminder that sometimes the most terrifying objects aren't ancient artifacts or cursed relics, but the things we create ourselves, the stories we tell, and the beliefs we choose to embrace. And it's a warning that in the digital age, a curse can spread faster and further than ever before. These are the Crying Boy paintings, a series of mass-produced prints that became infamous in the 1980s, not for their artistic merit, but for their supposed curse. They were blamed for house fires, for unexplained misfortunes, and for a chilling ability to survive the very flames that consumed everything around them. This is the bizarre and surprisingly widespread story of the Crying Boy painting. Imagine a painting, a simple, sentimental portrait of a young boy with large, tear-filled eyes. It's the kind of artwork you might find in a thrift store, a mass-produced print, kitschy and unremarkable. But then, imagine that painting hanging on the wall of a house that has just burned to the ground. Everything is reduced to ashes, except for the painting, untouched, unscorched, the crying boy staring out from the devastation, his tears seemingly mocking the tragedy. That's the image that fueled the legend of the Crying Boy paintings. It all started in 1985 in England with a series of house fires. Firefighters began to notice a strange pattern. In the charred remains of homes, they would often find a print of a crying boy, completely undamaged. The story gained traction when The Sun, a British tabloid, published an article with the sensational headline, "Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy." The article claimed that firefighters had found dozens of these paintings in the ruins of burned-out homes, and that they believed the prints were cursed, somehow responsible for the fires. The story exploded. Panic spread. People who owned Crying Boy prints, and there were many, these were mass-produced, inexpensive artworks, began to fear for their homes, their lives. The Sun, ever eager to capitalize on a good scare, even organized a mass bonfire, encouraging readers to send in their cursed paintings to be destroyed. But where did these paintings come from? And what made them so seemingly fireproof and so terrifying? The most common signature on the Crying Boy prints is Giovanni Bragolin. But Bragolin was a pseudonym, and there were actually multiple artists and slightly different crying children. The paintings are all very similar with the same features. One artist was a Spanish painter named Bruno Amadio. He painted dozens of portraits of crying children, and these prints were sold in department stores across England in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. They were popular, sentimental, and utterly unremarkable until the fires. Stories began to circulate about the origin of the paintings. One popular legend claimed that the original Crying Boy was an orphan in Spain, whose parents had died in a fire. The boy himself was said to be cursed, with fires breaking out wherever he went. An artist, drawn to the boy's tragic story, painted his portrait, only to have his studio burn down shortly afterward. The boy, the story goes, eventually died in a car crash. It's a compelling narrative, filled with tragedy and a hint of the supernatural. But like many cursed object legends, it's difficult to verify. There's no record of a Don Bonillo, the name often given to the boy, or of the artist who supposedly painted him. So, what about the fires? Were the paintings truly cursed, or was there a more rational explanation? In 2010, comedian and investigator Steve Punt looked into it. He acquired a crying boy print and on camera attempted to set it on fire. The result? The painting didn't burn. It scorched, but it didn't ignite. Punt's explanation was simple. The prints were treated with a fire-retardant varnish, and in a house fire, the string holding the painting would likely burn first, causing the print to fall face down, protecting it from the flames. A mundane explanation, perhaps, but it doesn't fully explain the widespread panic, the sheer number of people who believed in the curse, the firefighters who swore they'd seen dozens of these paintings survive fires unscathed. The Crying Boy paintings are a fascinating example of how a legend can take hold, how fear can spread, and how a simple, mass-produced object can become imbued with a terrifying power, not through any supernatural force, but through the stories we tell about it. And perhaps that's the real curse of the Crying Boy, the enduring power of fear, and the way it can turn a simple painting into a symbol of dread and destruction. This is the Balleroy Chair of Death, an antique blue upholstered armchair. It seems unremarkable at first glance. But this isn't just any chair. It's said to be cursed, imbued with a dark energy that brings death to anyone foolish enough to sit in it. This is its chilling story, a tale of a haunted mansion, a mischievous ghost, and a piece of furniture that you definitely don't want in your living room. Imagine a grand old mansion filled with antiques, creaking floorboards, and whispers of the past. That's Balleroy Mansion in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Built in 1911, it's a sprawling 32-room stone house, the kind of place that seems destined to be haunted. And according to its longtime owner, George Mead Easby, it was very haunted. Easby, who lived in the mansion for most of his life, was a collector of antiques and a lover of ghost stories. He filled Balleroy with objects from around the world, creating a museum-like atmosphere, a place where the past seemed to bleed into the present, and he claimed that the house was filled with spirits, with strange occurrences, with unexplained phenomena. He reported seeing the ghost of the original owner, a carpenter who supposedly murdered his wife. He said that he would feel cold spots, would hear disembodied voices, that phantom arms would reach out and grab him as he slept. He even said that the ghost of Thomas Jefferson haunted the dining room. But among all the haunted happenings at Balleroy, one object stood out: the Chair of Death. The chair itself is an antique, believed to be about 200 years old, with a high back and blue upholstery. It's said to have been made by a warlock in the 1800s. It was even rumored to have once belonged to Napoleon Bonaparte. It looks like something you'd find in any antique shop or in the corner of a dusty old library. But according to Easby, this chair was deadly. He claimed that a mischievous ghost, which he called either Amelia or Amanda, resided within the chair. This spirit, he said, would appear as a red mist, luring unsuspecting victims to sit in the chair. And once they did, their fate was sealed. Easby told stories of people who had sat in the chair and died shortly afterward. A housekeeper, a cousin, a friend named Paul Kimmins all succumbed to the chair's curse, dying within weeks of taking a seat, he claimed. He kept the chair in the mansion's blue room, and he would often string a rope across it to prevent guests from accidentally sitting in it. He relished telling the stories, embellishing them, playing up the danger, turning the chair of death into a local legend. Now, it's important to note that Easby was a bit of a showman. He loved the attention, the notoriety, the idea of living in the most haunted house in Philadelphia. He even tried to get into acting and movie producing. So it's possible, even likely, that he exaggerated some of the stories, played up the curse for dramatic effect. But the legend of the Balleroy Chair of Death persists, and after Easby's death, the mansion was opened to the public for tours, with the chair as a star attraction. Visitors would flock to see it, to peer at it, to dare each other to touch it. The mansion is now a private residence again, and the fate of the Chair of Death is uncertain. It may still be within the walls of Balleroy, lurking in a darkened room, waiting for its next victim. Or it may have been sold, passed on to another unsuspecting owner, its curse continuing to spread. Is the Balleroy Chair of Death truly cursed? Or is it simply a product of a vivid imagination, a clever bit of showmanship, a way to add a touch of darkness and mystery to an old mansion? Perhaps. But the stories, the chilling tales of sudden death and unexplained occurrences are enough to make anyone think twice before taking a seat. And maybe that's the real power of the curse, not in the object itself, but in the fear it inspires, the stories it generates, and the enduring human fascination with the things that go bump in the night. This is Busby's stoop chair. It hangs on a wall in the Thirsk Museum in North Yorkshire, England, high enough that no one can sit in it. And that's a good thing, because according to legend, this seemingly ordinary wooden chair is cursed, responsible for the deaths of dozens, perhaps even scores, of people who dared to take a seat. This is its chilling story. The story begins in 1702, in the small market town of Thirsk, North Yorkshire. A man named Thomas Busby, a known counterfeiter and by all accounts a thoroughly unpleasant character, was convicted of murdering his father-in-law, Daniel Orty. Some state that they got into an argument about Orty's daughter. Others claim that Orty sat on Busby's favorite chair. As the story goes, on his way to the gallows, Busby was granted one last request, a final drink at his favorite pub. He sat in his usual chair, finished his ale, and as he was led away to his execution, uttered a chilling curse. "May sudden death come to anyone who dares sit in my chair." Busby was hanged, his body dipped in tar and displayed on a gibbet, a warning to other would-be criminals. And the pub, eventually, became known as the Busby Stoop Inn, a grim reminder of the executed man and his infamous curse. And here's where the legend truly takes hold. Over the centuries, the Busby Stoop chair became a local curiosity, a macabre attraction. People, perhaps fueled by alcohol, perhaps by a dare, perhaps by a simple disregard for superstition, would sit in the chair. And, according to legend, many of them met untimely ends. There were stories of a chimney sweep who sat in the chair and later hanged himself. Of World War II airmen stationed at a nearby base who took turns sitting in the chair and never returned from their missions. Of a cleaning lady who accidentally brushed against it and later died of a brain tumor. Of a delivery driver killed in a crash. The list goes on, each death adding another layer to the chair's deadly reputation. The stories became so widespread, so persistent, that the landlord of the Busby Stoop Inn eventually decided he'd had enough. He couldn't bring himself to destroy the chair, but he couldn't risk any more deaths. So, he donated it to the Thirsk Museum with one condition: that it be displayed in such a way that no one could ever sit in it again. And that's where it remains today, hanging on the wall, well above head height, a silent testament to the power of belief, the enduring allure of a good curse story, and the surprisingly deadly history of a seemingly ordinary chair. But here's where the story takes a twist. In 2014, a furniture historian named Dr. Adam Bowett examined the chair, and his findings cast doubt on the entire legend. He concluded that the chair, the one hanging in the museum, was not from the 18th century. It was a machine-made chair dating from the mid-1800s, at least a century and a half after Busby's execution. So, is the legend a complete fabrication? A clever marketing ploy by a pub owner? Perhaps. But there's another possibility, a more unsettling one. What if the museum has the wrong chair? What if the real Busby Stoop chair, the one imbued with the murderer's dying curse, is still out there, somewhere, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim? The Busby Stoop Inn is no longer operating under that name. However, the building still stands. The Busby Stoop chair is a chilling example of how a simple object, a seemingly mundane piece of furniture, can become a vessel for fear, a focal point for legend, and a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary things can hold the most extraordinary and terrifying. This is the conjured chest. It looks like a perfectly ordinary antique chest of drawers, handcrafted from mahogany, with elegant scrollwork and brass handles. But this is no ordinary piece of furniture. It's said to be cursed, responsible for the deaths and misfortunes of over a dozen people. A chilling legacy of violence, revenge, and dark magic. This is its terrifying story. The story begins in Kentucky around 1830. A wealthy, and by all accounts cruel, plantation owner named Jeremiah Graham ordered one of his enslaved workers, a skilled craftsman named Remus, to build a chest of drawers for his soon-to-be-born child. Remus poured his skill and energy into the creation, crafting a beautiful, sturdy piece of furniture. But Graham, for reasons unknown, hated the chest. Perhaps it didn't meet his exacting standards. Perhaps it was simply a manifestation of his inherent cruelty. But he flew into a rage, and in a fit of brutal violence, he beat Remus to death. And that's where the curse begins. The other enslaved people in the household, horrified by Graham's brutality and grieving the loss of Remus, decided to take revenge. They performed a ritual, a conjuring, over the chest, using, among other things, dried owl's blood and whispered incantations, imbuing the object with a dark and malevolent energy. The chest, once a symbol of hope and new life, became a vessel of death and misfortune. And the curse, it seemed, was potent. The chest was placed in the nursery of Graham's newborn child. Soon after, the baby died. Then, Graham's nephew, who inherited the chest, met an untimely end. The tragedies continued, passing down through generations of the Graham family, each death linked in some way to the conjured chest. A young girl, who stored her clothes in the chest, died at the age of 10. A bride-to-be placed her wedding dress inside, only to have her fiancé die shortly afterward. A baby's clothes, tucked away in the drawers, preceded the infant's sudden death. The list goes on, a chilling litany of loss and suffering, all connected to the seemingly innocent chest of drawers. The stories surrounding the conjured chest are detailed and specific. passed down through the family, recorded in letters and diaries. They paint a picture of a family haunted by a dark legacy, trapped in a cycle of tragedy, seemingly orchestrated by a vengeful spirit. The chest eventually made its way to Virginia Carey Hudson, a descendant of Jeremiah Graham. She grew up hearing the stories of the curse, witnessing firsthand the misfortunes that befell those who came into contact with it. And she documented these events, sharing the chilling tale of the conjured chest in her writings. But Virginia Carey Hudson did more than just document the curse. She also, reportedly, broke it. Following the advice of a family servant, she performed a counter-ritual using a combination of herbs, prayers, and a symbolic burial to cleanse the chest of its dark energy. The conjured chest, no longer a source of fear and death, was eventually donated to the Kentucky Historical Society, where it resides today. It's a physical object, a tangible link to a dark and disturbing past, a reminder of the enduring power of belief, the legacy of slavery, and the chilling way that objects can become imbued with the stories, the emotions, and the curses of those who created and possessed them. It serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the most beautiful objects can hide the darkest secrets, and that the sins of the past can cast a long and terrifying shadow. This is the story of the Bassano vase, a 15th century silver vase, beautiful, ornate, and, according to legend, utterly deadly. It's said to have brought misfortune and death to everyone who owned it, a chilling trail of tragedy spanning centuries. But this isn't just a story of a cursed object. It's a story of a mystery, a legend shrouded in whispers and rumors, with very little concrete evidence to back it up. This is the enigma of the Bassano vase. The tale begins in 15th century Italy, near Naples. On the eve of her wedding, a young bride is given a beautiful silver vase as a gift. But this is no ordinary vase. It's a harbinger of doom. That very night, the bride is murdered, the vase clutched in her dying hands. And with her last breath, she supposedly curses the object, vowing that it will bring death to anyone who possesses it. From there, the vase becomes a legacy of death, passed down through the bride's family. Each owner, according to legend, meets a tragic, untimely end. The details are murky, the names mostly lost to time, but the pattern is consistent. Possession of the vase equals death. Eventually, the family, realizing the terrible power of the object, decides to hide it away. It's sealed in a lead container, some say, and buried, perhaps in the consecrated ground of a church, or in some forgotten corner of the Italian countryside. And there it remains, hidden and forgotten, for centuries. Then, in 1988, the vase resurfaced. A man, digging in his garden, unearths the lead container and inside the gleaming silver vase. Ignoring the supposed warning, a note found with the vase stating, "Beware, this vase brings death." He sells it, eager to profit from his unexpected find. And the curse, it seems, is reawakened. The vase passes from hand to hand, each new owner meeting a swift and tragic end. A pharmacist who bought it at auction dies within 3 months. A surgeon next in line perishes just 2 months after acquiring it. An archaeologist, fascinated by the vase's history, meets a similar fate. The stories are chillingly consistent, each death adding another layer to the vase's dark legend. Finally, a family, terrified by the string of tragedies, reportedly throws the vase out of a window. A passing police officer, seeing the act, attempts to return the vase, but the family refuses, and the officer instead issues a fine. No museum will take it. No collector will touch it. The Bassano vase, it seems, is too dangerous, too cursed, to be owned by anyone. And then it disappears. Again, vanishing into obscurity, its current whereabouts unknown. The story of the Bassano vase is a classic cursed object tale. It has all the elements: a tragic origin, a string of mysterious deaths, a hidden object, and an ultimate disappearance. But it's also a story riddled with holes, with inconsistencies, with a frustrating lack of concrete evidence. There are no names, no dates, no verifiable records to confirm the deaths, the owners, or even the vase's existence. The only evidence often cited is a cropped newspaper photo, supposedly from an Italian publication, showing a vase that vaguely resembles the description. But the photo is grainy, the context unclear, and the source unverified. Even the name Bassano is problematic. It doesn't correspond to a specific place in Italy, nor is it a common Italian surname. It's a linguistic ghost, adding to the mystery and the sense of unreality that surrounds the story. So, is the Bassano vase a genuine cursed object, a vessel of death and misfortune? Or is it a fabrication, a modern-day legend fueled by internet rumors and a desire for a good, spooky story? It's difficult to say. The lack of concrete evidence makes it tempting to dismiss the story entirely. But there's something about it that lingers, a chilling possibility that perhaps somewhere out there, a beautiful silver vase, centuries old, waits in the shadows, carrying with it a curse that defies explanation, a darkness that cannot be contained. And perhaps it's best that it remains lost. A chilling reminder of the power of legends and the enduring human fascination with the things we cannot understand. Stone figures dug up in gardens, huge rocks carved with angry old words, initials marked in cobblestone roads, even whole rooms made of shiny amber. On the outside, they might just look like old stuff, art projects, or just rocks. But some things, some places, seem to carry bad luck, disaster, and even death. These are cursed objects and places, things and spots believed to have a dark energy, bringing bad luck, sad stories, and often scary things happening to people who find them, mess with them, or dare to take a piece. Today, we're diving into the creepy world where history, superstition, and stuff we just can't explain all crash together. We'll look into the weird story of strange stone heads found in English gardens, connected not just to spooky things moving around, but even werewolf sightings. We'll check out a giant rock in Carlisle, carved with an angry 16th century curse, blamed for everything from floods and sickness to a local football team getting kicked down a league. We'll uncover the creepy college curse tied to initials in Scottish cobblestones, marking where someone was burned alive for their beliefs. We'll explore the weird story of a pillar in Georgia that just wouldn't stay destroyed, coming back again and again, even after people tried to tear it down. We'll even look at why people desperately mail back rocks they stole from special places and national parks, trying to calm down whatever bad luck they think they've stirred up. Then, we'll tell the amazing, sad story of the lost amber room, called the Eighth Wonder of the World, stolen by Nazis, lost during World War II, and maybe protected by its own deadly curse that killed people looking for it. And finally, we'll head to the Hollywood Hills to dig into the legend of lost Mexican gold, a treasure hunt full of backstabbing, murder, and a curse that might still be around today. These are stories about things that aren't normal, places you shouldn't disrespect, and the often scary things that can happen when warnings aren't taken seriously. Sometimes we give spooky things silly names, maybe to make them seem less scary. Sometimes, though, it just makes them even creepier. Let me tell you about Little Manny, and you can make the call on this particular cursed object. As always, viewer discretion is advised. Little Manny is, well, little. He's a bulbous, carved stone figure, only about 3 inches tall. If you look straight at him, he seems like a bald man with a big head, a heavy brow, large nostrils, and stubby little arms or wings sticking out from a legless body. But turn him sideways, and you'll see faint arcs on his head that some say look like horns. From that angle, his nose looks more like a snout, giving him a ram-headed, almost occult appearance. This look might be what inspired his full, rather unsettling name, the Little Manny, with his daddy's horns. The Manny part likely refers to Manchester, England, where he lives today. The story begins in the 1960s. A cleaning lady named Lucy Healy was working underneath the Conservative Club in Hollingworth, England, a building dating back to the 17th century. While vigorously scrubbing the dirt floor of the basement, she unearthed a small lump of stone. It was the figure, originally painted green, but in her enthusiastic cleaning, Lucy washed the paint right off. Still, she decided to keep the strange little statue. Word got around town about the discovery. Soon, a local history professor, Tony Ward, and his friend, Pat Ellison, decided to do an amateur dig at the spot where Little Manny was found. What they uncovered seemed ritualistic, a circle of candles surrounding chicken and rabbit bones, ivory billiard counters, and even a statue resembling a mother figure. It looked like a foundation sacrifice, an old practice meant to bring good luck to a building. This discovery only added to Little Manny's local fame. Then, in 1974, the statue caught the eye of A.J.N.W. Pragg from the Manchester Museum. Pragg was putting together an exhibit on Celtic heads, small ancient stone faces often found across Europe, especially the UK. Hollingworth had yielded a few such heads, so Pragg was intrigued, even though Little Manny looked different. The initial theory was that he might represent the horned Celtic god Cernunnos, the lord of animals. Pragg tried to buy the figure from Lucy Healy, but she refused to sell for many years. Finally, in the mid-1980s, Pragg was able to acquire it. The Healys apparently needed money for a vacation, and perhaps more tellingly, they seemed to have been experiencing a string of minor misfortunes ever since bringing the figure into their house. Once Little Manny arrived at the Manchester Museum, the strange occurrences didn't stop. They just shifted venues. Staff began to suffer similar minor misfortunes. The employee who photographed Little Manny for the museum archives dinged his car twice on consecutive nights, despite having a perfect 18-year driving record. A museum director reportedly broke his thumb shortly after scoffing at the piece. An exhibit worker gashed his head open. Accounts of minor illnesses and other small damages swirled around the artifact. Eventually, it became infamous within the museum, and many staff members decided to simply keep their distance. At first, the museum's geologist wouldn't even examine it to determine what kind of stone it was made from. At some point, Pat Ellison, one of the original amateur excavators, visited the museum to see the figure again. Hearing about all the mischief attributed to it, she took Little Manny in her lap, stroked it, and then pulled a few strands of hair from her own head, wrapping them around the statue. Was she trying to deactivate its powers? Or maybe just make it happy and less prone to causing trouble? One of the two. The strangeness continued. One night, Prague took little Manny home with him, intending to take it to London the next day for analysis by a materials expert. That very evening, someone broke his car window. The next morning, while Prague was on the train to London, his zipper broke in the bathroom, forcing him to safety pin his pants shut. This bizarre incident even made the news. On July 2nd, 1991, the British tabloid The Sun ran a piece with the headline, "There's no flies on little Manny. Curse rips boss's zip." The headline font, one imagines, dripped ominously. That same year, during little Manny's first public exhibition, the story took a dramatic turn. An expert in African artifacts examined the figure and immediately informed the museum staff that it wasn't Celtic at all. It was, unequivocally, a Nomoli statue from Sierra Leone. Nomoli are ancient figures carved by an unnamed extinct civilization, often found underground or in caves. Today, the Mende people of Sierra Leone use these artifacts to protect their homes and bless their crops, often by burying them. Nomoli are considered good luck charms. Suddenly, little Manny wasn't a potentially cursed Celtic artifact, but the exact opposite, a misplaced African good luck charm. When you compare photos of Nomoli figures with little Manny, the resemblance is undeniable, especially compared to actual Celtic heads. Little Manny looks just like a weathered, broken version of these African carvings. And when the stone was finally examined, it was found to be felsite, a rock type plentiful in both England and Western Africa. So how could a good luck charm become associated with so much misfortune? The theory goes that removing a protective object from its home and burying it in a strange land, especially amongst ritualistically placed bones and candles, could corrupt its purpose. As for how a Nomoli figure traveled over 4,000 miles from Sierra Leone to wind up buried beneath an old building in England, well, a few theories exist, but they mostly boil down to trade, one way or another. After all, England has a long history of acquiring artifacts from around the globe. Why exactly it was buried there, with the bones and candles, remains a mystery. Today, you can find little Manny, buried again, this time in a drawer at the Discovery Centre of the Manchester Museum. If you look closely, you might even still see Pat Ellison's hair wrapped around him. Whether it pacified him, or if the little good luck charm is still holding a grudge, is up for debate. This is the cursing stone of Carlisle, England, or rather, was the cursing stone. It's a massive granite boulder inscribed with a 16th century curse, a furious denunciation of border raiders who plagued the region centuries ago. But this isn't just a historical artifact. It's said to be cursed, blamed for floods, disease, economic hardship, and even the relegation of a local football team. This is its strange and controversial story. Carlisle, a city in Cumbria, England, sits near the border with Scotland. For centuries, this border region was a turbulent place, a battleground between warring kingdoms and a haven for reivers, raiders who plundered and pillaged on both sides of the divide. These reivers, they were a rough bunch. Think cattle rustling, feuds, violence, all that good stuff. They were such a menace that there was even talk of repairing Hadrian's Wall to help keep order. In 1525, the Archbishop of Glasgow, Gavin Dunbar, had had enough. He unleashed a curse, a blistering 1,069-word denunciation of the reivers, condemning them to hellfire and damnation. It was a curse so epic, so comprehensive that it covered pretty much every aspect of their lives, from their heads to their toes, from their waking hours to their sleeping ones. He even cursed all their body parts, inside and out. Now, fast forward to 2001. The city of Carlisle commissioned artist Gordon Young to create Pjotut, a public artwork to commemorate the millennium. Young, inspired by the history of the border region, decided to incorporate a portion of Archbishop Dunbar's curse into his design. He chose a massive, rounded granite boulder weighing 14 tons, and on its surface he inscribed 383 words of the curse, a fragment of Dunbar's furious tirade. The artwork, titled Cursing Stone and River Pavement, was installed in a pedestrian tunnel, a seemingly innocuous piece of public art. And then, things started to go wrong. Shortly after the stone's installation, a series of misfortunes befell Carlisle. A devastating outbreak of foot and mouth disease ravaged local livestock. Factories closed, jobs were lost. The River Eden flooded, submerging thousands of homes. And perhaps most damningly, in the eyes of some, the local football team, Carlisle United, was relegated to a lower division. The people of Carlisle, understandably, began to look for something, anything, to blame. And their gaze fell upon the cursing stone. The logic, or perhaps the illogic, was simple. A curse had been inscribed on a stone, and bad things had happened. Therefore, the stone was cursed, and the curse was responsible for the city's woes. The controversy grew. Local politicians called for the stone's removal or destruction. There were accusations of Satanism, of dark forces being unleashed. The story made national headlines. The cursing stone became a symbol of misfortune, a lightning rod for fear and frustration. The city council, caught in the crossfire, considered their options. Removing the stone would be expensive and complicated. Destroying it might appease some, but it would also be seen as giving in to superstition. In the end, they opted for a compromise. They installed a plaque next to the stone, inscribed with a Bible verse, Philippians 4:8-9, hoping to counteract the curse. And things seemed to calm down. The floods receded, the economy recovered, and Carlisle United, well, they remained in the lower division. But at least the city wasn't facing any further biblical scale plagues. But the story of the cursing stone doesn't end there. Because in a twist of fate that seems almost too perfect, the stone itself has been repeatedly damaged. Not by vandals, not by protesters, but by vehicles. On 3 separate occasions, the cursing stone has been struck by vehicles, each time requiring repair or replacement. In the latest incident, a car crashed directly into it. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or maybe, just maybe, the curse, though aimed at 16th century raiders, still packs a punch, lashing out at anything that comes too close, a reminder of the enduring power of words, the lingering fear of the unknown, and the way that even a modern city, a place of science and reason, can be swayed by the whispers of a centuries-old curse. These are the initials PH. Seemingly innocuous, they're set into the cobblestones outside St. Salvator's Chapel at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. But these aren't just any initials. They mark the spot where a young man was burned at the stake for heresy. And they carry a chilling curse, a warning to students that stepping on them could lead to academic ruin. This is the story of the monogram of Patrick Hamilton and the curse that haunts the heart of a prestigious university. St. Andrews, Scotland, a town steeped in history, home to one of the oldest universities in the English-speaking world. But beneath the veneer of academic excellence and ancient traditions, there lies a darker history, a legacy of religious persecution and a curse that continues to resonate with students to this day. The story begins in the 16th century, during the tumultuous years of the Protestant Reformation. Patrick Hamilton, a young scholar and preacher, had embraced the teachings of Martin Luther, challenging the authority of the Catholic Church. He returned to Scotland, bringing with him these new, radical ideas, and began to preach them at the University of St. Andrews. But his words were deemed heretical. In 1528, at the age of just 24, Hamilton was arrested, tried, and condemned to death. He was burned at the stake, just outside St. Salvator's Chapel, a brutal and agonizing execution that lasted for 6 long hours. And it's at the spot where Hamilton met his fiery end that the curse is said to reside. The initials PH, set into the cobblestones, mark the place of his martyrdom, and according to legend, any student who steps on those initials will fail their exams. It's a seemingly minor curse compared to some of the others we've explored. No death, no dismemberment, just academic failure. But for students at a prestigious university like St. Andrews, where academic success is paramount, the threat is taken seriously. You'll see students carefully navigating the cobblestones, avoiding the PH as if it were a landmine. They'll leap over it, sidestep it, even walk in the road to avoid accidentally treading on the cursed monogram. It's become a ritual, a tradition, a part of the university's unique folklore. But there's more to the story than just the initials. If you look up at the wall of St. Salvator's Chapel, above the spot where Hamilton was burned, you'll see something even more unsettling. A face. It's a distorted, grotesque face carved into the stone, its features blackened and weathered by time. Some say it's a depiction of Hamilton himself, his face contorted in agony as the flames consumed him. Others believe it's a representation of the evil that condemned him, a reminder of the brutality of religious persecution. The face, combined with the cursed initials, creates a chilling atmosphere, a palpable sense of history and tragedy. It's a reminder that even in a place of learning, of enlightenment, darkness can linger, and that the past can cast a long and unsettling shadow. Now, of course, there are those who dismiss the curse as mere superstition, and perhaps they're right. But the enduring power of the legend, the way it's woven into the fabric of university life, the way students still, centuries later, carefully avoid stepping on those 2 letters, speaks to something deeper. It's a reminder of the power of belief, the way fear can take root and shape our behavior, and the way that even the most rational, the most academically inclined, can be swayed by the whispers of a centuries-old curse. And let's be honest, who wants to risk failing their exams just to prove a point? This is the story of a pillar, a seemingly ordinary 10-foot-tall column of brick and concrete. It once stood in Augusta, Georgia. But this was no ordinary pillar. It was said to be cursed, blamed for accidents, misfortunes, and even deaths. And in a twist that defies logic and reason, the pillar itself seemed to resist destruction, returning again and again, despite multiple attempts to obliterate it. This is the bizarre and unsettling tale of the cursed Pillar of Augusta. The story begins in the 1830s with the construction of a market in downtown Augusta. According to local legend, a traveling preacher, an exhorter as he was called, took to using the market as his pulpit, delivering fiery sermons to the assembled crowds. But the market was a place of commerce, not worship. The merchants and traders, more interested in selling their goods than in hearing about fire and brimstone, had the preacher removed. And that's when the curse was uttered. Enraged at being ejected, the preacher condemned the market, prophesying that it would be destroyed by a furious wind, that all would be reduced to rubble, except for one single pillar, the very pillar he'd been standing beside. And strangely enough, his prophecy came true. In 1878, a freakish tornado, as it was described, ripped through Augusta, leveling the market. And amidst the devastation, one pillar remained standing. The cursed pillar, as it came to be known, had survived. From that moment on, the pillar became a focal point for local law, a symbol of the preacher's wrath, a tangible reminder of the power of a curse. But the story doesn't end with the market's destruction. It's what happened to the pillar afterward that truly cements its cursed reputation. Over the years, the curse was said to extend to anyone who touched the pillar, anyone who tried to damage it, even anyone who got too close. There were stories of accidents, of sudden illnesses, of misfortunes befalling those who dared to interact with the pillar. Highway workers, merely doing their jobs, were supposedly struck down. People in pickup trucks, fueled by alcohol and a desire to test the curse, reportedly died in car crashes on their way to topple the pillar. Even the intersection where the pillar stood was said to be unusually dangerous, plagued by a higher-than-average number of accidents. But the most bizarre aspect of the cursed pillar's story is its repeated destruction and reappearance. The pillar was first destroyed in 1935 when it was struck by a vehicle. The driver, remarkably, survived, but the pillar was reduced to rubble. And yet, it was rebuilt. Then, in 1958, it happened again. A massive bale of cotton fell from a passing truck, smashing the pillar to pieces, and again, it was rebuilt. And finally, in 2016, a car crashed directly into the pillar, obliterating it once more. Photos of the wreckage, the pillar reduced to a pile of bricks and dust, circulated on social media. And yet, there are those in Augusta who are determined to rebuild it again. Why? Why would a city repeatedly reconstruct an object that's supposedly cursed, that's blamed for so much misfortune? Some say it's tourism. The cursed pillar, with its bizarre history and its chilling reputation, draws visitors, curious to see the infamous object, to test their courage, to perhaps even feel the chill of the curse for themselves. Others claim it's a matter of civic pride, a refusal to be cowed by superstition, a determination to preserve a piece of local history, however strange and unsettling. Or perhaps there's a deeper, more unsettling reason. Perhaps the people of Augusta fear what might happen if the pillar isn't rebuilt. Perhaps they believe that the curse, though directed at the market, has somehow become attached to the pillar itself, that its destruction would unleash something even worse, something even more terrifying. The cursed pillar of Augusta is a testament to the enduring power of belief, the way stories can shape our reality, and the way a simple object, a seemingly insignificant column of brick and concrete, can become a vessel for fear, a focal point for legend, and a chilling reminder of the things we cannot explain. And it raises a question: is it better to confront a curse, to defy it, or to appease it, to rebuild it again and again, in the hope of keeping its darkness contained? You've heard of cursed objects, items imbued with misfortune, bringing bad luck to those who possess them. But what about cursed places. And what happens when you take a piece of that cursed place home with you? This is the story of stolen stones, returned with apologies, and the surprisingly widespread belief that taking souvenirs from certain locations can unleash a torrent of bad luck. Think of a national park, a historic site, a place of natural beauty or cultural significance. Now imagine taking a small piece of that place home with you. A rock, a pebble, a handful of sand. A seemingly harmless souvenir, a tangible reminder of your visit. But what if that seemingly harmless souvenir carried with it a curse? It sounds like the plot of a horror movie, but it's a surprisingly common belief, and one that has real-world consequences. Parks and historic sites around the world report receiving packages, almost daily, containing rocks, stones, and other objects that visitors have taken, and then, after experiencing a string of misfortunes, decided to return. The letters accompanying these returned objects are often filled with apologies, with tales of bad luck, of accidents, illnesses, financial troubles, all attributed to the seemingly innocent souvenir. Their pleas for forgiveness, desperate attempts to appease whatever forces they believe they've unleashed by taking a piece of a cursed place. Take, for example, Uluru, also known as Ayers Rock in Australia. This massive sandstone monolith is sacred to the indigenous Anangu people, and it's said to be cursed. Visitors who take rocks from Uluru often report experiencing a string of misfortunes, prompting them to mail the rocks back, sometimes years later, with heartfelt apologies. Or consider Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona. The park is filled with beautiful petrified wood, ancient trees turned to stone, and it's illegal to take any of it. But people do, and many of them regret it. The park receives countless packages containing pieces of petrified wood, accompanied by letters detailing the bad luck the thieves have experienced. The same phenomenon occurs at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, where visitors who take volcanic rock or sand often report experiencing the wrath of Pele, the Hawaiian volcano goddess. And it's not just natural sights. Blarney Castle in Ireland, famous for its Blarney Stone, which is said to bestow the gift of eloquence upon those who kiss it, also has a curse associated with taking stones from the castle grounds. Is it a genuine curse? A supernatural force unleashed by disturbing a sacred place? Or is it simply the power of suggestion, the guilt of having taken something that doesn't belong to you, manifesting as a series of unfortunate events? Perhaps it's a bit of both. The belief in the power of place, the idea that certain locations are imbued with a spiritual energy, is a common thread in many cultures. And the act of taking something from that place, of disrupting its natural or historical integrity, can be seen as a violation, a transgression that carries with it a karmic debt. So, the next time you're tempted to pocket a pretty rock or a handful of sand from a national park or a historic site, remember the stories of the returned stones. Remember the apologies, the tales of misfortune, the desperate pleas for forgiveness. Perhaps it's best to leave these places as you found them, to respect their power, their history, and their potential for retribution. These are the Hexam heads, two small stone carvings, roughly the size of tennis balls. They were unearthed in a suburban garden in England in 1971. They're crude, almost childlike in their design, with simple yet unsettling features. But these aren't just any ancient artifacts. They're said to be cursed, linked to strange occurrences, terrifying visions, and werewolves. This is the bizarre and baffling story of the Hexam Heads. Hexam, England, 1971. Two young brothers, Colin and Leslie Robson, were playing in their garden when they made a remarkable discovery. Digging in the soil, they unearthed two small stone heads. The heads were roughly spherical, with crudely carved features, simple eyes, noses, and mouths. They had short, neck-like stems, suggesting they might have once been attached to larger figures. At first, the boys thought they'd found something ancient, perhaps relics of Roman Britain, which wasn't uncommon in that area. But when they brought the heads inside, things started to get weird. Objects in the house began to move on their own. The heads themselves were said to swivel, their crude stone eyes seeming to follow people around the room. And then there were the sightings. Terrifying, inexplicable sightings of a werewolf-like creature roaming the house. The family next door, the Dodds, experienced even more intense phenomena. They reported invisible forces pulling their hair, and most disturbingly, seeing a half-man, half-sheep creature prowling through their home. The story of the Hexam Heads and the terrifying events surrounding them quickly spread. The local newspapers picked it up, and soon the national media was captivated by the tale of the cursed stone carvings and the werewolf sightings. And then, an expert entered the picture. Dr. Anne Ross, an archaeologist specializing in Celtic artifacts, became intrigued by the Hexam Heads. She examined them, studied them, and declared them to be genuine Celtic heads, dating back perhaps 1,800 years. She even took the heads to her own home for further study. And that's when things got even weirder. Dr. Ross, a respected academic, a scholar of ancient cultures, reported experiencing similar phenomena to the Robsons and the Dodds. Cold spots, doors opening and closing on their own, and, most incredibly, sightings of a wolf-like creature in her home. A respected archaeologist claiming to see a werewolf, all because of two small stone heads. It was a story that defied logic, that challenged rational explanation, and it made the Hexam Heads infamous, turning them from a curious local find into objects of national fascination and fear. But then the story took another, even more unexpected turn. A man named Desmond Craigie, who had lived in the Robsons' house before them, came forward with a startling confession. He had made the heads. Craigie, a construction worker, explained that he'd carved the heads in 1956 during his lunch breaks as a simple amusement for his daughter. He'd used local stone, and he'd made 3, not 2. He'd buried them in the garden and forgotten all about them. A chemical analysis of the stone seemed to confirm Craigie's story. The Hexam Heads weren't ancient Celtic artifacts. They were modern creations, the product of a bored worker's idle hands. Case closed, right? A hoax, a misunderstanding, a case of mass hysteria fueled by local folklore and a respected academic's overactive imagination. But what about the werewolf sightings? What about the strange occurrences reported by multiple witnesses in multiple locations? Were they all lying? Were they all victims of a collective delusion? Or is there something more to the Hexam Heads, something that defies rational explanation? And here's another twist. The Hexam Heads disappeared. After passing through the hands of various researchers and paranormal investigators, they vanished, their current whereabouts unknown. And the third head, the one Craigie claimed to have made, it's never been found. The Hexam Heads remain an enigma, a puzzling mixture of folklore, hoax, and genuinely unexplained phenomena. They're a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary objects can become imbued with extraordinary stories, that the line between reality and fantasy can blur, and that even in the modern world, there are mysteries that defy logic, that challenge our understanding, and that continue to send a chill down the spine. This is the story of the Amber Room. Not a room containing amber, but a room made of amber. A dazzling chamber crafted from tons of intricately carved amber panels. Backed with gold leaf and mirrors, it was considered the eighth wonder of the world. But the Amber Room is also a story of theft, of war, of mystery, and, some say, of a curse. This is its remarkable and ultimately tragic tale. Imagine a room shimmering with golden light, walls paneled entirely in amber, intricately carved into elaborate designs, reflecting the light of hundreds of candles. Mirrors, mosaics, gemstones, all adding to the dazzling effect. It was a chamber fit for a king, a masterpiece of craftsmanship and artistry. The Amber Room was created in Prussia in the early 18th century. Originally intended for Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin, it was eventually installed in the Berlin City Palace. But its beauty, its sheer opulence, made it a coveted prize, a symbol of power and wealth. In 1716, King Frederick William III of Prussia, in a gesture of goodwill and alliance, presented the Amber Room to Tsar Peter the Great of Russia. The panels were carefully dismantled, packed into crates, and transported to Russia, where they were reassembled in the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. It was later moved again. This time, it was moved to Catherine Palace. More amber was even added, turning it into something even grander. For over 2 centuries, the Amber Room remained in Russia, a treasure beyond price, a symbol of imperial grandeur. But its fate, like that of so many treasures, was intertwined with the turbulent tides of history. Then came World War II and the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. The Nazis, obsessed with looting the art and treasures of conquered nations, had a specific target in mind: the Amber Room. They considered it a German treasure, stolen from Prussia, and they were determined to reclaim it. The Soviets, aware of the Amber Room's value, attempted to hide it. They tried to disassemble the panels, but the amber, brittle with age, began to crumble. In a desperate attempt to conceal it, they covered the walls with wallpaper, hoping to fool the invaders. It didn't work. The Nazis, with their own team of experts, quickly discovered the hidden treasure. They dismantled the Amber Room, packed it into crates, and shipped it to Königsberg Castle in Germany, now Kaliningrad, Russia. And there, it was reassembled, displayed as a trophy of war, a symbol of Nazi conquest. But as the tide of the war turned, as the Soviet army advanced, the Amber Room's fate again became uncertain. In 1944, as Königsberg was under siege, the room was dismantled, packed away, and disappeared. And that's where the mystery truly begins. What happened to the Amber Room? It's one of the great unsolved mysteries of World War II, a treasure hunt that has captivated historians, adventurers, and conspiracy theorists for decades. There are countless theories. Some believe it was destroyed in the bombing of Königsberg. Others claim it was loaded onto a ship, the Wilhelm Gustloff, which was then sunk by a Soviet submarine, sending the Amber Room to the bottom of the Baltic Sea. Still others believe it was hidden away in a secret bunker, a mine shaft, or a forgotten castle waiting to be rediscovered. There have been numerous searches, expeditions, and investigations, all fueled by the hope of finding this legendary treasure. Small pieces, fragments of the original amber room, have surfaced over the years, tantalizing clues that suggest it might have survived the war. But the room itself, in its entirety, remains lost. And of course, there are whispers of a curse. Some say that the amber room, like so many looted treasures, carries with it a dark energy, a curse that brings misfortune and death to those who seek it. There are stories of researchers, treasure hunters, and even former Nazi officials who met untimely ends, their deaths linked in some way to their pursuit of the amber room. Alfred Rode was in charge of getting the amber room away from the museum and was later interrogated by the KGB. He and his wife died suddenly. General Yuri Gusev, a Russian intelligence officer, died in a car crash after supposedly leaking details to the press. And Georg Stein, another treasure hunter, met a gruesome end in a German forest. Is the amber room truly cursed? Or is it simply a victim of war, of greed, of the human desire to possess beauty and power? We may never know the truth. But the story of the amber room, a masterpiece of artistry lost to the chaos of war, remains a compelling mystery, a reminder of the enduring power of legends and the way that even the most beautiful objects can become entangled in the darkest chapters of human history. This is the story of the treasure of Cahuenga Pass, a tale of lost gold, betrayal, murder, and a curse that, some say, still lingers over the Hollywood Hills. It's a Wild West story, mixed with a touch of Hollywood glamour and a healthy dose of mystery. And it all revolves around a treasure that, to this day, remains unfound. The story begins in 1864, in Mexico, during a time of political upheaval and war. Benito Juarez, the president of Mexico, was fighting to maintain control against the invading forces of Emperor Maximilian, backed by France. Desperate for funds to support his army, Juarez gathered a treasure: $200,000 in gold, diamonds, and pearls, a fortune in those days. He entrusted 4 men to transport the treasure north to San Francisco, where it could be used to purchase weapons and supplies. But the journey was fraught with danger, and the treasure, it seemed, was cursed from the start. One of the messengers died en route, the first victim of the treasure's supposed curse. The remaining 3, reaching California, found San Francisco crawling with French spies and sympathizers. Fearing the treasure would be discovered, they decided to hide it. They divided the loot into 6 parcels, wrapped them in buckskin, and buried them in separate locations in the hills outside Los Angeles. And then, as if following a script from a cursed object movie, things went horribly wrong. When the 3 men returned to retrieve the treasure, they found the hiding places empty. Accusations flew, tempers flared, and a violent confrontation ensued. 2 of the men were killed, leaving only 1 survivor, who was later jailed, and then, after being cleared of murder charges, gunned down in Tombstone, Arizona. 4 men were now dead. It turned out that a shepherd named Diego Moreno had witnessed the men burying the treasure. Moreno, seeing an opportunity to change his life, dug up the loot and headed south towards Los Angeles, planning to use the Cahuenga Pass, a rugged mountain trail. But along the way, Moreno stopped for the night. He had a dream, a nightmare, in which he was warned of dying if he took the gold into Los Angeles. When he woke up, he decided he had to hide it once again. Moreno never made it to Los Angeles with the treasure. He died suddenly of an unknown illness. But before he died, he revealed the location of the hidden treasure to a friend, Jesus Martinez. Martinez, accompanied by his stepson, set out to recover the loot. But as they reached the spot where Moreno had described, Martinez suffered a seizure and died, becoming another victim of the treasure's growing body count. The treasure remained hidden for years until, in 1885, a Basque shepherd stumbled upon one of the buckskin-wrapped parcels. He, too, decided to change his life, booking passage on a ship to Spain. But as he boarded, he slipped and fell. The heavy treasure, sewn into his clothes, dragging him down to a watery grave. Over the years, the legend of the treasure of Cahuenga Pass grew. It became a local obsession, a tale whispered in saloons and around campfires, and the body count continued to rise. In the 1930s, a man named Henry Jones, armed with a newfangled metal detector, launched a major search for the treasure, focusing on an area that is now the Hollywood Bowl. The search was a media sensation, drawing crowds of onlookers and generating headlines, but after weeks of digging, all they found was a deep hole and a growing sense of frustration. Jones, reportedly, ended up taking his own life shortly after. The treasure, despite numerous attempts to locate it, has never been found. It remains hidden somewhere in the hills of Los Angeles, a tantalizing mystery, a source of endless speculation, and, some say, a lingering curse. Is the treasure of Cahuenga Pass truly cursed? Or is it simply a case of bad luck, greed, and the dangers of treasure hunting? It's difficult to say. The stories surrounding the treasure are filled with embellishments, contradictions, and a healthy dose of Wild West hyperbole. But the legend endures, a reminder of the enduring allure of lost treasure. The way stories can take on a life of their own, and the way that even in the heart of a modern, bustling city like Los Angeles, there can be secrets, mysteries, and whispers of curses that continue to fascinate and terrify.